and therefore would require Florida, quote, to satisfy the extraordinarily onerous standard of proving that its use in race was narrowly tailored to further a compelling government interest, end quote. As explained in my transmittal letter of April 27, Florida cannot do so. We, therefore, continue to urge you to enact the proposed congressional map transmitted therewith. David Axelman, General Counsel to the Governor.
Leader Berman.
Thank you, Mr. President. So does anything in what you just read state that the court is striking down Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act?
President Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm reading from what the General Counsel's provided. And according to the information that we've received, the court has concluded that Louisiana's creation of an additional majority-minority district to comply with a federal court construction of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act was unconstitutional and a racial gerrymander.
Leader Berman.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I have a copy of the opinion in front of me. On the third page, I guess, of the opinion, the bottom of the second page, it says that they answer the question that compliance with Section 2 as properly constructed can provide such a reason. Are you disagreeing with the actual wording of the agreement of the opinion where it says that the Voting Rights Act can be used to provide an opinion that minority districts can be still upheld?
President Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. My understanding, Leader, is that what the court has said is that in order to justify a racially constructed district, there has to be a compelling record of egregious racial discrimination that immediately precedes and causes the construction of that district. And consequently, Leader, those conditions, as far as I know, and I'm not a lawyer, would not apply in the case of Florida or any Florida district that is under discussion.
That is that you still, under Calais, can not discriminate against minorities in the redistricting process, and that they are laying out what the requirements for strict scrutiny is in Calais. Would you agree with that?
President Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but I would particularly agree with the second part of what you said, and that is that the court has said that there have to be certain conditions in existence in order to justify the creation of a district that's drawn with racial intent or racial lines. And those conditions are that there has to be an immediate record of egregious racial discrimination that precedes and provokes the necessity for the creation of that district. I don't believe that it goes further than that. That, I believe, is the black letter of the opinion.
Leader Berman.
So I just want to try, this is very much the heart of a lot of what we're doing today, so I want this to be as clear as we can on this issue. So are you aware that the Supreme Court in Calais held that compliance with the Voting Rights Act can, in fact, be a compelling state interest?
President Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, under the strict scrutiny conditions that the court refers to, none of which apply in Florida.
Leader Berman.
Thank you, Mr. President. President Gates, does any part of the Calais decision explicitly address the legality of Florida's Fair District Amendment?
President Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, not being an attorney, let me qualify what I'm about to say with that and say, not to my knowledge. To my knowledge, the Calais decision does not impact what we are attempting to do here on the floor of the Florida Senate, and it does not impact the governor's plan in any negative way.
Leader Berman.
Thank you, Mr. President. But does it impact the actual words of our Florida Constitution under the Fair Districts? Does it change the interpretation in any way of the constitutional amendment.
President Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think now you've asked me to go deep into legal analysis that's beyond my scope. I would simply say that the governor's legal counsel has rendered his opinion and his description of the effect of the Clay decision, which is to say that the Clay decision, if anything, sets a much, much higher standard for the creation of a district that is drawn with reference to racial lines, a much higher standard than because of the preconditions necessary for that standard to be met, none of which apply in Florida. But beyond that, Leader, I don't believe that I'm competent to go as deep into the legal nuances as your question would suggest.
Leader Berman.
Thank you, Mr. President. So interesting that you said none of which apply in Florida. Have we actually done the deep dive that we normally do with redistricting, where we go around and look at maps and make decisions, or are we were just given one map by the governor without the opportunity to really do a deep dive to show that there is no reason why we should have certain districts in Florida?
President Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. No, we did not do a series of hearings around the state as we did in previous years. But I believe that if you or anyone else is suggesting that the conditions that would have to be precedent to the drawing of a district with racial lines exist in the state of Florida, and remember what the Supreme Court has said, there have to be an egregious record, an immediately existent egregious record of racial discrimination that require the development or use of district lines drawn with racial intent. If you believe that to be the case, or anyone else does, I believe you have the burden of proof.
Leader Berman.
Thank you, Mr. President. So is it your opinion that, or well, okay, just want to understand, just want to clarify also. So you're, based on the Calais decision, you are of the opinion that are you of the opinion that we could have a statute that in Florida that still says you can't discriminate based on partisanship?
President Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, I believe so. And I believe so long as that statute was written and narrowly tailored in the way that the Supreme Court's decision has indicated, not the way that we commonly have used racial boundaries in redistricting in the state of Florida, but rather we would have to prove, someone would have to lay out the proof, and that proof I think is not existent, at least on the floor of the Senate today, and nowhere that I know of in the state of Florida. There would have to be a huge, weighty amount of proof in order to meet the Supreme Court's strict scrutiny standard. And if so, we ought to include that in Florida statutes. It's not there now. We'd have to rewrite the statute.
Leader Berman.
With respect to what you just said previously about that we haven't done the strict scrutiny to see if there should be a minority district, don't you think that should be handled on a court level also?
President Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm not an officer of the court, so that's beyond my competence to determine. My assumption as a layman and as a citizen is if there are lines drawn and districts created in violation of what the Supreme Court has said, and that is that in order for a racially drawn district to be drawn with racial lines, that there has to be these precedent. If you or anyone else believes that the district lines have been drawn in violation of now what the Supreme Court has said, and you bring a case in court, then obviously the courts would have an opportunity to decide that case. Yes, ma'am.
Leader Berman.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I do just want to go back to the Fair Districts Act, our Constitution, and because this is so important, that still the provisions in the Fair District Act that apply to partisan, to not doing maps in a partisan basis, are still in effect after Calais.
President Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, I fear that you're asking me for a legal opinion that's beyond my competence. So let me refer you to what the Governor's Council said in the Rules Committee. The Governor's Council said in response, because race-based provisions in Article 3, Section 20 are inconsistent with federal law, the next question becomes, what about the rest of Article 3, Section 20? That has other things in it of the kind that you've described. The executive branch position on this is that the rest of Article 3, Section 20 cannot be saved. It is inseverable from the other provisions. As you will recall, Leader, we had a robust discussion in the rules yesterday about severability, and I'm not sure that we came to a conclusion that entirely satisfied me. My own personal belief as a senator is that there are many aspects of fair districts, particularly all of the Tier 2 provisions, as well as not drawing districts where the entire intent and purpose of the district is to draw a district that has lines that would promote one political party or one candidate or another, that those aspects of fair districts ought to be saved. I would respectfully take that position as a member of the Senate.
Further questions? Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Mr. President Gates, for opining on that. I'm trying to square what you just mentioned to Leader Berman in my own assessment of the bill, because going back to my line of questioning before, I respect your experience and your leadership as someone who knows redistricting very well. So I don't want to belabor the point, but my question is based on your opinion then, if you could make clear for the Senate, do you buy this argument that race-based requirements in the Fair Districts Amendment cannot be severed, that they cannot be severed from other requirements in the Fair District Amendments, specifically as it relates to the current prohibition on partisan gerrymandering, which is the current law and the current Constitution that we were sworn to uphold?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I attempted to explain to Leader Berman a moment ago, there was a lively discussion, and I think you were there, you observed it in the Rules Committee about this very topic. There were those, in the room who appeared to take the position that there are aspects of the fair districts that could be, that are, and ought to be not necessarily thrown out or excluded, no matter what happens with federal court decisions, and no matter what happens with this bill that's before us. But the Governor's Council has said the executive branch position is that the rest of Article 3, Section 20 cannot be saved, and it's inseparable. I believe that that's a topic for later construction by this legislature. And speaking only as one senator, I believe, as I said to Leader Berman, that there are aspects of fair districts that are different from, that are separate issues from, drawing lines with racial intent, and that those separate parts of the Fair Districts Amendment should be and ought to be contained in Florida law. And as one senator, I would vote to do so.
Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. President Gates, so squaring that with what we all heard yesterday in the Rules Committee, you witnessed the same thing that I witnessed, but I just want to get some clarification. The governor's office yesterday did, in fact, openly admit that they did consider partisan criteria in drawing this map. Is that correct?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, the governor's office indicated that the map drawer, Mr. Pareda, said on behalf of the governor that that political data was used along with all other data. He stated in the Rules Committee yesterday that it was not the dominant or controlling data that was used, but it was used.
Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. And yesterday, from my perspective, they made a lot of stunning assertions. Do you agree with the governor's office's repeated assertions yesterday in the Rules Committee that the legislature, quote, doesn't need to comply with any provisions of the Fair District Amendment? You just said, President Gates, that it is a topic worthy of the consideration at a future date, but with all due respect, aren't we considering it right now with this map that does admittedly include partisan considerations?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. With respect, Senator, no. First of all, I was not stunned. And secondly, I believe that the governor's position is one which has been clear, and that is that the governor does not believe that racial preference should be any part of the drawing of any line. For the last 2 years, I've sat in this chamber and I've listened to bill after bill, amendment after amendment, speech after speech about how we ought to be treating people in the state of Florida based on their merit, on the quality of their character, on what they do, not on the color of their skin. And the governor has taken the position, in my view, that that is the case in drawing lines for congressional districts, just as it is in other matters. And so consequently, I'm not troubled by that position on behalf of the governor. I believe that we can pass these maps and we can still have a belief that, you know, some of us in the room may believe that there are aspects of fair districts that still ought to be included in Florida law. And in answer to a question that I asked the governor's legal counsel yesterday, I said, do you need to win that point? Do you need to win the point that all of fair districts has to go in order for you to prevail in your legal theory? And the answer to that question, I think, was, well, no, not really.
Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm also not an attorney, President Gates. I just play one on the Florida channel. My question for you is, do you believe that by passing a map that admittedly was drawn using partisan consideration in current violation of the Fair Districts Amendment to Florida's Constitution, that would be a violation of the oath that we all took to uphold and defend Florida's current Constitution as it is currently written?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. There's an assumption in your question, and the assumption is that it would be proven that the use of partisan data was a controlling factor in the drawing of those lines by the governor's map drawer. I think that would have to be proven in court, and if it were proven in court, then obviously it would be illegal, in my judgment, as a non-lawyer, based upon the law in Florida as it exists now. But that would have to be proven in court. There is no proof that I've heard or seen in the presentation made in the Rules Committee yesterday or in any discussion or debate on the floor today that the lines that were drawn by the governor's map drawer were drawn with a controlling interest in partisan gerrymandering.
Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for the clarification, President Gates. I want to ask you about this language, which is new language to me as it relates to Article 3, Section 20A of the Constitution, that somehow the Florida Constitution only bans considering partisan interests in map drawing if it's some sort of prevailing or predominant consideration. That's new information to me. I have the Constitution in front of me, and it says, no apportionment plan or individual district shall be drawn with the intent to favor or disfavor a political party or an incumbent. I didn't read anywhere in there anything about a predominant motivation or interest. I just read you the black and white text. Doesn't the Constitution say we can't consider partisan interest at all?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. No, I don't think that what you read said that we can't consider partisan interests at all. I think what you read said that that the lines cannot be drawn, quote, with the intent. And I think then, and again, you and I are not lawyers, Senator, but I would guess that that very sharp litigators would be determining and parsing through what the intent means. Does it mean that that is the controlling intent? Does it mean that that is what occurred? Or does that mean it was one of 15 different data points that was used? This is beyond my competence, Senator. I'm not a lawyer, but my guess is that if this is a ripe issue, if the one you're raising is a ripe issue, and I dare say it may be, that that'll be decided in court.
Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I appreciate the fact that you continue to say that a court needs to decide. We don't have a court order here. We just have black and white text of the Constitution that tells us what the law is. This chamber has repeatedly undergone intentional years-long efforts to engage in redistricting in a way that does not consider partisanship because we have respected the Constitution. Suddenly, this new notion that, well, maybe we just can consider it after all and let the court decide is something that's new to me. Help me understand. Are we simply to ignore our constitutional oath just because we're persuaded by an argument today, even if we don't have a court order that tells us that we can ignore the Constitution?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. No, with all respect, Senator, I don't believe that that we are being asked to violate our oath, nor do I believe that we are in a different world with respect to the use of partisan data than the world in which we have lived for the last 15 or 20 years in redistricting. Partisan data has always been a part of or a subtext of redistricting that has occurred, either in terms of its use among the many data points that go into redistricting, or the criticism that might be made afterwards having to do with the effect of redistricting. But I do not believe we've entered into any kind of new troublesome era in which the maps that the governor's office has presented to us are drawn with any more partisan domination than any maps that we've seen in the past.
Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. President Gates, I heard you this morning and yesterday when you described your role in this, which is, of course, as the chair of the Senate Ethics and Elections Committee. You were respectfully asked to file the bill, and you believe the governor, I'm paraphrasing, of course, is constitutionally entitled to be able to present a map, and we're just doing him the courtesy of considering that map that he has given us. My question for you is, while he has that authority as you have described, what is the urgent need for the Florida Senate to adopt this map? Don't we also have the constitutional authority as an institution to consider this map and just reject it?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes.
Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. What is the urgency behind adopting this congressional map in particular, especially in the context of a new court decision where we do not have an updated staff analysis that helps us fully understand all of the implications of the ruling? What is the urgency, Mr. President?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. The governor's legal counsel said in the Rules Committee yesterday, and I quote, "The governor's stated reasons for redrawing the congressional plan now are twofold. One, it's to account for the greater population growth between 2020 and 2025 in the suburban and exurban communities throughout the state. And two, it is to ensure that the state has a race-neutral congressional plan."
Senator Smith.
That is my strong belief that the actual intention for this redrawing is partisan favor for the majority party. But has the governor called on the Florida legislature to redraw our state Senate maps and our state House maps, since we have had a population change and all of the things that he asserted also apply to our legislative maps?
Senator Gates.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. No, and the reason is because the governor has a constitutional prerogative with respect to congressional maps, and the governor has no constitutional prerogative with respect to state Senate or state House maps.
Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to make sure for the record, no one gets it twisted. I am not advocating for us to redraw our state Senate or state House maps. Just wanted to put that out there. However, if the legislature believes in the governor's argument that we must urgently redraw these congressional maps for the stated reasons that you just described, doesn't that rationale also apply to our legislative maps?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've not been provided with a rationale, an argument, or a plan that would support such a contention.
Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. On process, was the map drawn by the map makers that we heard from by hand, or did they use any sort of outside algorithms that you're aware, Mr. President?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yesterday, the map drawer, Mr. Pareda, was asked and answered on behalf of the governor that he drew the map himself, that it was a map that was drawn in iterations, and that no one else drew the map. He drew every single line, although he consulted with legal counsel and other members of the executive office of the governor.
Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, President Gates. I know that the map maker we heard from is very talented. He's very experienced. He knows very well what he's doing. Did he draft any alternate maps for us to consider? And if he didn't, why didn't he give us a menu of options to choose from?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. The governor's office and the governor's representatives did not present any map or any proposal other than the one that was transmitted to me, which I in turn had transmitted to the entire Senate, which is before you now.
Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, President Gates. I understand that you received the transmittal of the governor's map and you've not been involved in the process. I fully understand that, and I think the timestamp was 11:15 a.m. Yesterday morning. However, President Gates, do you have any personal knowledge of any other map that was drafted by the governor's office recently that was shared with members of the legislature?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have had no contact with anyone in the governor's office about congressional redistricting. The only communication that has occurred has been the communication that occurred electronically, which I in turn shared through the president with all members of the Senate. I've had no other contact with anybody in the governor's office about any map drawing of any kind.
Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. President Gates, can you help us understand why this specific map, this version and no other version, was selected by the governor's office and transmitted to you at 11:15 a.m. on Monday?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. All I can do is repeat what the governor's representative said, and that is that they believed that the product that they provided on behalf of the governor met the standards that were necessary for congressional redistricting, and met the governor's two objectives, and that was to take into account population surges and also to ensure that there would be no lines drawn with racial intent. Beyond that, I certainly can't comment on what else the governor's office may have done or thought about.
Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. I know that very famously, the governor first shared this map with Fox News before it was shared with the Office of the Senate President and before it was shared with your office, President Gates. And the map that was shared with Fox News is not what was transmitted to us. It was a color-coded red and blue map to detail how red performing this map is. Are you aware of any other map that maybe has been provided to the Senate or that has been provided to other media outlets that shows us where the incumbent members of Congress in Florida live in these districts and whether any of them were drawn out of their districts?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me repeat what I said before, Senator, and that is I have no knowledge of any map or any map drawing or any work in drawing maps other than what was transmitted to me, which I in turn through the President had transmitted to all members of the Senate. And so therefore the answer to your question is no.
Senator Smith.
Thank you, President Gates.
Additional questions. Senator Polsky.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just one more question on the severability so we can be totally clear. Are you aware that the non-severability argument has not been adopted by any court?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am not aware of any court's action with respect to severability as to this matter.
Senator Polsky.
Thank you, Mr. President. You mentioned just before that the governor said one of the reasons for making this map are population surges. What data are those population surges based on, and how were they used to create this map?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, I can refer to Mr. Parade on behalf of the governor and his comments at the Rules Committee yesterday, and I believe that his comments are responsive to your question. Mr. Parade has said that the Office of Economic Research and Demographic Research, through the use of the American Community Survey, which is a rolling sample provided by the U.S. Census Bureau, where they sample 1 to 3% of the U.S. population every year, was used by the map drawers in the creation of their map. The governor's representative went on to say that based upon that analysis, Florida gained approximately 9% of our population over the last 5 years, 9% increase over 5 years, which translates to just over 1.8 million people on top of what we already had in 2020.
Senator Polsky.
Thank you. I've heard it said by various people that Florida was gypped in the last census, meaning that we should have had one more additional congressional seat. Obviously, this map does not do that. It changes the formation of the map within our 28 congressional seats. So how does this population data rearrange the citizens so that they are more fairly distributed?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Polsky, you're exactly right, and that is that the governor's proposal does not provide for an additional congressional seat for the state of Florida. That's beyond the purview and jurisdiction of the governor and the legislature of the state of Florida. That's a determination based on the census, and the census showing in the division of 435 members of Congress how many members of Congress would be assigned to each state. And there are those who believe that we should have had an additional member of Congress assigned to us based on the 2020 census. I'm not a demographer, and so consequently I don't have an opinion about that. Obviously, as a citizen, it would be nice if Florida had more representatives in Congress, but I believe that that has to be the function of the census, not a function of my opinion.
Senator Polsky.
Thank you. But how does the data that you referred to before affect how these districts have been changed by this map? In other words, what does it have to do with dividing the city of Tampa into 3 sections? What does the data have to do with making a seat from Palm Beach County from the Atlantic Ocean to the Gulf of Mexico? How does that happen? Where is that data to prove that those districts are more correctly distributed?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. The representatives of the governor have indicated that the maps that they have presented to us are based on the 2020 census, and they also have used information from the Office of Economic Research and Office of Economic and Demographic Research through the American Community Survey, which is a rolling sample by the U.S. Census Bureau. And as provided to us by Mr. Pareda at the Rules Committee yesterday, Mr. Pareda said that changing populations are based on EDR's estimate. We cannot assign them to census blocks or equalized population based on those estimates, but, and these are his words on behalf of the governor, we can certainly know which counties are growing faster than others, which counties are growing faster than the state average or slower than the state average, and then account for those in the orientation of the districts so that those populations can be accounted for.
Senator Polsky.
Thank you, Mr. President. So the census that was initiated by Trump in 2020 and was monitored by this current governor between 2020 and 2022 to create the map that he gave us in 2022 based on that census data, he believes now, 5 years later, 6 years later, is incorrect. Is that true?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. With respect, Senator Polsky, I don't believe that President Trump initiated this 2020 census. I think the 2020 census was going to occur no matter who is president of the United States. And secondly, what the governor's representatives have said is that since 2020, there has been a 9% increase in the population of the state of Florida. That's 1.8 million more people, and that constitutes, with EDR's analysis of that research and which counties are growing faster than other counties, that provides them the basis then for making the map determinations that they have made.
Senator Polsky.
Thank you, Mr. President. So that additional 1.8 million people, are they all, well, first of all, we weren't supposed to use partisan data, but if we are, and he admitted to that, are they all Republican? Why is the map so red, especially the one that was sent to Fox News?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, in my dreams, they would all be Republicans, but I don't believe that that is the case. The map that was sent to Fox was not sent by me. When we asked the governor's representatives and the Rules Committee yesterday where that map came from that was sent to Fox, they said they didn't know. They said they didn't send it. And therefore, I only know what they said with respect to what they said they didn't do. All I can tell you is that I had nothing to do with sending a map to Fox. Let me go, however, one step further. It is not unprecedented that chief executives, when they are auditioning a new public policy, go to the public or go to the media before they go to the legislative body. This occurs with presidents of the United States, with governors, with mayors. That chief executives will say, this is what I'm thinking about doing, and they audition it through leaks to the media or through actual presentations to the media or actual tours around the state or tours around the country saying this is what I'm about to do, and then they submit the bill. That happens. And I know that we would like, as legislators, to be the very first ones who are told what the governor or the president or the mayor want to do. And we perhaps get our noses out of joint, speaking only for myself, if I'm not the first one to be told. The fact is that chief executives do that all the time. I have no idea how Fox News got that map, but regardless of how they got that map, it is certainly within the governor's prerogative to audition his public policy initiatives in any way he wants to, and then come with a piece of legislation to the Florida legislature.
Senator Polsky.
Thank you. That actually wasn't my question. I just was pointing out how the map turned out. So if population growth is neutral as far as registration goes, why does this map that this governor put out, our only map that we could consider, why does it favor Republicans so much and so out of sync with voter registration numbers, which should have given Democrats even potentially more seats than they currently have based on registration numbers?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Polsky, and I say this most respectfully, I didn't draw the map. I didn't draw the map that was colored red. I didn't see that until it was on Fox News. And so I have no idea why it was done that way or what the intent was, if there was an intent. And so therefore, I can't improve upon my answer to that question.
Senator Polsky.
I'm not asking about, thank you, Mr. President, I'm not asking about the map that was sent to Fox News. I'm asking about the map that we are voting on before us. If it is supposed to be a change from the map that this governor gave us in 2022 because of certain population growth, that's the justification, why is it so out of sync with our voter registration numbers?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't know that it is. The 1.8 million new people who moved to Florida in the last 5 years, I don't know what their voter registration is. I suspect that information could be obtained. I don't know the answer to that question. And so therefore, I don't know why, other than some sort of an analysis that you or anyone else might conclude that gives Republicans an advantage or a disadvantage. I'm not sure that it does. I'm not sure that this map necessarily gives Republicans an advantage.
Senator Polsky.
Thank you, Mr. President. If you believe, and the governor's office believes, that this map does not violate the Fair Districts Amendment that was passed overwhelmingly by the voters, what would be an example of something that would violate the Fair Districts Amendment?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. What I believe is probably inconsequential to this debate. What the governor believes, and I'm quoting from the governor's legal counsel in his remarks to the Rules Committee yesterday, because race-based provisions in Article 3, Section 20 are inconsistent with federal law, the next question becomes, what about the rest of Article 3, Section 20? The executive branch position on this is that the rest of Article 3, Section 20 cannot be saved. It is inseverable from the other provisions. We've talked about severability. If you're asking me as a layman, what violation of the Fair Districts or what action with respect to the Fair Districts Amendment could be considered a violation other than using race as a dominant reason for drawing lines, obviously would be creating districts that look like Rorschach blots on the map, which has occurred sometimes in the past in Florida and in other states. I believe the lack of compactness, there was a lack of compactness, that would be a reason why the Fair Districts Amendment, assuming part of it could still be retained in law, and I believe it can be, might be violated. And that's why I'm comforted by the governor's map drawer indicating that in the compactness scoring for the maps presented by the governor is the same in compactness as the underlying map that we have right now.
Senator Polsky.
Thank you, Mr. President. With respect to compactness, I'm thinking of a district that was drawn that goes from Miami through Broward up to Palm Beach along the coast. That has not been the current state of that sort of district. 3 very large counties, very dense, very urban, that would cause a particular congressperson to have a much huger area to represent. So you may say the compactness numbers are the same, but there are no districts like that now. There's no districts that go from the East Coast to the West Coast. So how is that compact? How is that similar communities? How does that even make sense for a congressperson to represent their area fairly?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. That's a question that should be presented to the governor's map drawers because it is a technical question as to why they drew lines in a particular way and how the drawing of those lines figure into the calculus that the governor's office uses when they make the evidenced claim that the compactness overall of the map is the same as the compactness of the underlying map, the one that we have right now. But I can't answer the question with respect to a specific district because I didn't draw the lines.
Additional questions? Senator Arrington in question.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good afternoon, President Gates. Just to follow up kind of on a question that Senator Polsky had just asked a few moments ago about the partisan information being used to draw the maps. So approximately, and we had talked about what maybe that data is, approximately 41% of Florida's registered voters are Republicans, yet the map that we are voting on today creates 24 out of the 28 districts to be Republican leaning. Do you believe that outcome is consistent with the Fair Districts Amendment?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. With very clear and due respect to my friend and colleague, Senator Pizzo, I believe that a minority can be a majority. I think that if you have 41% of the population who all are members of one political party, and then you have the rest of the population divided up among several different political initiatives or political parties, that minority can be a majority because it becomes the plurality, it becomes the dominant feature, because not all of the other minority parties or constituencies all vote the same way. If they did, then I think your question would be much more poignant. But the answer to the question is I see no particular problem in 41% of the people of Florida being able to elect members of Congress so long as they represent the majority of the individuals who show up at the polls and vote in those elections.
Senator Arrington.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for that answer, President Gates. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but am I understanding from what you've said previously that it's your assumption that the legislature or the governor can redraw maps at any point?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. No, I would certainly not think so. I would think that in order for the governor or for any member of the legislature to propose a congressional redistricting, that there would have to be reasons why. There would have to be a rationale for why to do it. It could not be done flippantly or just any day of the week. I believe the governor has provided what he considers to be an appropriate and, he said, compelling rationale for why to do it now. And one is to deal with the disproportionate population surges in the state of Florida and the resulting inequity in terms of one person, one vote. And secondly, to ensure that no lines are drawn with a racial bias.
Senator Arrington.
Thank you, Mr. President. And President Gates, you mentioned earlier, I believe 4 times you mentioned that we've done mid-decade redistricting, but I don't know if we've dialed in on the reasons for those other ones. Have any of those been because the governor or the legislature has called for that?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. No, and that's why, as I've described those 4 mid-decade redistrictings, I've said they have been done for other reasons. And the reasons in the case of those 4 have been court actions. Similarly, or in the same context, you have 7 states other than Florida that have already done mid-decade redistricting, and their mid-decade redistricting, say that quickly, have been done for various reasons. There have been various provocations in those states. But in answer to your question, to my knowledge, there's been no gubernatorial initiative in the case of the 4 prior mid-decade redistrictings in the state of Florida.
Senator Arrington.
Thank you, Mr. President. That is a mouthful. I'm having a hard time even saying that myself. My last question for you, President Gates. We heard yesterday governor's office, executive staff were around or were present for the map drawing. We didn't get answers on who those folks were. Do you know or have you heard of any external consultants that were used for the map drawing, and if so, who they were and how they were paid?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. That question was asked yesterday of the representatives of the governor, and Mr. Pareda answered on behalf of the governor, saying that there were no outside consultants used, and that the only individuals who he used, other than himself, were legal counsel in the office of the governor and certain members of the governor's executive staff who he declined to name.
Additional questions? Senator Bracy Davis, any questions?
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Gates, so yesterday, I believe you talked about when you received the maps on Monday at 11:15. And thank you, by the way, because I think you mentioned that as soon as you got it, you forwarded it on to the legislature and you got it out of your hands and into our hands. But just want to make sure, for clarity purposes, the map that you received was not color-coded, or was the map color-coded that you received?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. The map that I received is the same map that you received. There were no other codes or colors other than the maps that I received, which were exactly the ones that I forwarded on to you.
Additional questions? Senator Bracy Davis.
Thank you. And I have tried really hard to mark off the questions that you've already answered, but I may have missed some things, so forgive me on that. Offer some grace. The email from Mr. Axelman to President Gates said the proposed redistricting plan is race neutral, complies with the U.S. Constitution, allocates equal protection, and compact and contiguous. That statement specifically omitted compliance with the Florida Constitution. Is this an admission that the proposed plan violates the state constitution?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. No. Rather, the governor's legal theory is that the Fair Districts Amendment violates the federal constitution.
Senator Bracy Davis.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Did you yourself or the staff analyze partisan performance metrics when drawing these lines?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. Since I drew no lines, the answer to the question is no.
Senator Bracy Davis.
Fair answer. Thank you, Mr. President. Did your staff analyze partisan performance metrics?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. No.
Senator Bracy Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. What specific safeguards did the map maker implement to avoid repeating violations of partisan intent? Thinking about the case in the League of Women Voters versus Detzer.
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. I apologize. I don't know. You would have to ask the map maker or the governor's office that question as to what safeguards they may have had in mind as they were drawing the maps.
Senator Bracy Davis.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Do you know if there were any safeguards? Do you know that they considered any safeguards?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. All I know is what the rest of us know. My entire knowledge of the map-making process, what was in the maps and why they were there, and the occasion for the maps was contained in the governor's presentation before the Rules Committee yesterday.
Senator Bracy Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. As the sponsor of this bill, did you obtain a formal legal opinion affirming this map and affirming that it meets the Florida Supreme Court standards?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. No, I've received no legal opinion other than the opinions that I have shared with you.
Senator Bracy Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. How does this map preserve communities of interest rather than fragmenting them from political outcomes?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. The whole notion of communities of interest is an interesting topic. It's one that I was involved in debating years ago following the 2010 census, and I can tell you that we lost that argument. We had much advocacy in favor of communities of interest, particularly I can think, for example, of the Panhandle where I live, and we lost that argument because it was deemed more important that we follow the Fair Districts Amendment. The Fair Districts Amendment, in this respect, was more concerned with compactness than it was concerned with communities of interest. Communities of interest, for example, in the Panhandle may run along the coastline for 100 miles or more. and there was at one point a state senate district that I represented that ran all the way from Pensacola to Panama City and beyond, all the way to the Gulf County line. But it was determined that districts like that, notwithstanding the fact that they were arguably communities of interest, could not be sustained under the Fair Districts Amendment, which required compactness.
Senator Bracy Davis.
Thank you, which leads me to my next line of questioning. You brought me right to it, which is compactness. So just based on your last answer, you are aware that the Fair District Amendments requires congressional districts to be compact and to utilize existing political and geographical boundaries where feasible.
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, and the map makers on behalf of the governor have indicated that they believe that they have done so and have provided a comparative analysis of the compactness of the districts drawn by the governor's office compared to the compactness calculus under the existing maps that we operate now. And the testimony of the governor's office yesterday was that they were the same calculus of compactness.
Senator Bracy Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to clarify what you just said because I want to clarify what you just said by way of an answer. Have you reviewed any analysis comparing the compactness scores of 2026 plan districts to those of the existing 2022 plan?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have not done any analysis of compactness. I simply am referring you to the testimony that was given by the governor's office yesterday.
Senator Bracy Davis.
So, thank you, Mr. President. So with that, I can assume that you are not aware that the 2026 plan is less compact than the 2022 plan.
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do not assume that and could not conclude that based on the information provided by the governor's office and their comparison of the scores, the compactness scores, as being consistent between the existing underlying plan and the plan that they have presented. That would suggest to me that the only evidence before us is the evidence that indicates that the compactness scores are the same or similar, not that they are different.
Additional questions? Senator Bernard, question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Gates, you had mentioned in the governor's letter that he had decided to do this map based on the population increase of 1.8 million voters. Senator Gates, is this map based on the population increase, or is it based on the 2020 census?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. My understanding, based on the testimony from the governor's mapmaker and legal counsel, is that the underlying numbers that were used for the 2020 census. However, the United States Census Bureau does a running 3-year analysis, which I referenced from testimony that was given by the governor's mapmaker yesterday, that data was used in connection with the Florida EDR analysis that showed which counties were growing faster, which ones were growing slower, and that information was used by the governor's mapmakers.
Three, two, and 1. Current City Council Vice President Nick Hallen is the only person running for Council President position, but there are 4 council members who are running for the Vice President position. That is Ken Amaro, Chris Miller, Rockman Johnson, and Joe Carlucci. All council members say that they are going to continue supporting public safety and transparent leadership. All right, 3, 2, and
the population estimates were used and how the information about additional population coming into the
lost a very good Florida resident yesterday, Coach Lou Holtz. And although he was not a coach in any of our state universities, he lived here.
Senator Bernard.
Last question, Mr. President. Do we know if he used the partisan data to add the ACS information or the EDR information with the map that he drew?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I apologize, Senator Bernard, but all I know about what the governor's office and their map maker used in developing these maps was what was provided in the Rules Committee yesterday. And my understanding and recollection and written record of what the governor's representative said was that, yes, they used political data like all map making or nearly all map making for the last 20 years has done, but that it was not a dominant feature in what they used. It was simply one more data point among many. That was their testimony, and that is all the information I have.
Additional questions? Senator Nathan, welcome. You are recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, President Gates, for your time. Did any legislator draw a single line for any district in this map?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President, and welcome to the Senate, Senator Nathan. It's good to see you here, and we welcome your questions, and we welcome your debate and your involvement in this and all issues. The answer to your question, as far as I know, is no.
Senator Nathan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, President Gates. Did any legislator come up with any of the ideas expressed in the plan we're about to vote on?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. To the best of my knowledge, no. I certainly didn't.
Senator Nathan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Is it correct that the governor's office is the sole map drawer for this map?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. The governor's office presented the map, and the governor's office representative, Mr. Pereira, indicated that he drew the map and that he alone drew the map, although we consulted with legal counsel and members of the executive staff of the governor's office. And as I explained previously, the governor has a constitutional role in congressional redistricting, and so it is entirely within the governor's purview to draw a map and present it to the legislature for us to consider.
Senator Nathan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, President Gates. So am I correct to understand that the governor's office made every policy decision in this plan?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. All I can tell you is that the governor's office is the only source of information about this map and about the governor's accompanying documents with the map, as far as I know. I have no idea beyond that, other than what we received in the Rules Committee and what we received in electronic transmittals, which I in turn forwarded to you.
Senator Nathan.
Thank you, Mr. President. So the governor's office made every choice on how Floridians are to be represented if these maps become law?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. Whoever draws maps is making choices. In this case, the governor's office drew maps and are presenting them to the Senate. We have a process here that would have allowed any member of the Florida Senate to offer amendments. If you believe that there was something wrong with any of the maps, you believe that it should have been done a different way, or the choices were made wrong, you could have offered an amendment. No amendments were offered.
Senator Nathan.
So how many individuals in the governor's office were making these decisions about representation, and how many of these people were elected by the residents of Florida?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't know.
Senator Nathan.
So to be clear, the legislature is totally deferring to the governor's office for congressional representation. Is that correct?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. Absolutely not. The governor proposes, the legislature disposes. The governor has done his part. He has used his prerogative as governor to propose a map, and he has provided his rationale for that map. It is now in our hands, and we have the authority to accept it, to reject it, or to amend it. It is not the governor's prerogative as to what the maps will be. It is ours now because the governor's proposal is in our hands to dispose of by majority vote of this chamber.
Additional questions. Senator Nathan.
Last question. Thank you, Mr. President. So this is the governor's plan, and we are being asked to follow along. Is that correct?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the governor's proposal. The governor makes proposals about many things. Many general bills are proposed by the governor, and we approve them. We vote them down. We amend them. We lay them aside. We take various actions through the legislative session. This is one more general bill. It's proposed by the governor, and we can dispose of it at the will of the Senate and House of Representatives.
Additional questions? Senator Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, we talked about the compactness. You talked about that a little bit, and I'm just going to say this. Do you feel like you're at a disadvantage having to defend this map?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm not defending this map. I'm transmitting this map and explaining the governor's proposal as it was laid out to us in transmittals and also at the Rules Committee.
Senator Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. So you're not defending, you're dealing with the transmittal. You talked over and over again about compactness, how this is equal to what was presented in the current map. And we all know, if you've paid any attention to this, that this map and the compactness scores that are used during redistricting, the REOC score, the Palsy-Popper score, and it's one other that I can't think of right now. This map that the governor has presented to us have lower scores. The gentleman, Robert Popper, which I talked about in committee, actually testified on the behalf of the governor's office at one time to talk about his criteria and compactness scores. His scores, this map that we're looking at, those three criteria that I just talked about, the REOC score, the Palsy-Popper score, is lower. So how do you keep saying that what we've been presented from the governor's office is about the same?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. I refer you to Mr. Paredes' remarks before the Rules Committee, in which he said the smallest circle that can fit around a district, the average score for the 28 districts in this map is 0.46, which is consistent with the benchmark map. It is the same with the Palsy-Popper score and the REOC score. That is the testimony of the governor's office.
Senator Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. And what we've identified is, and you said 0.46 actually by the way of the 2026, and that's why I questioned Mr. Pareda, because in 2022, the REOC score was 0.47 and the Palsy-Popper score was 0.43. In the 26 map, the REOC score is 0.46, as you stated, but the Palsy-Popper score is 0.41. Again, it feels like you're at a disadvantage with this transmittal and trying to explain how we are here dealing with a map that has lower compactness scores than what we already have currently. And how is that good for Floridians?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. I apologize if I appear to be at a disadvantage. All I've ever wanted in my life is a fair advantage. But I will tell you this, I do not make the claim that we have lower compactness scores presented to us by the governor in his map than exists now. All I am doing is reporting to you and repeating what the governor's representative said, who indicated that the average score for the 28 districts in the governor's map is 0.46, which is consistent with the benchmark map. Now, if you are drawing distinctions between 0.46 and 0.47, you've gone down a rabbit hole that is beyond my competence.
Additional questions? Senator Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm not going to ask you those questions anymore about compactness because I don't want to do that to you. We talked about St. Johns County yesterday, and in your opinion, Senator Gates, in your opinion, not from what was said, in your opinion, we heard that we are dealing with this new proposed map for race neutrality and population basis. The governor has said over and over, and my colleagues have stated it, that we're at 1.8 million of a population growth, and we need to address that. So again, dealing with that premise that we're dealing with race neutrality and population being the first, foremost of the important one, St. Johns County is the fastest growing county in the state. But we didn't do anything, and yesterday I corrected myself. I said CD6 and CD7. It's actually Congressional District 5 and Congressional District 6. If we are actually addressing population in this map, why do we not go from, and I tried to get the map maker to talk about this, why do we not take his initial start district and go all the way up from the south to the north, because the Northeast Florida is not touched at all.
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. You are now asking questions about the technique of map drawing, and if one is trying to draw a map that is consistent with an increase in population, where should you start? Should you start at the top of the state, at the bottom of the state, or in the middle of the state? And I believe that Mr. Preda provided his best analysis or his only answer to that question in committee. I have no way to improve upon his answer. I'm not a map drawer. I didn't draw any of the lines on this map, so I don't know whether it would have made sense to start with one of the counties in the state that is the fastest growing, that happens to be in my neck of the woods in Northwest Florida, or to start with St. Johns County, or to start anywhere else. The question is, how did it end up? And the answer that the governor's office has provided is that we end up with a map that is compact as compared to the map that is the underlying and existing map that we have now, and a map that does not use racial bias in the drawing of any lines. And that is the governor's testimony.
Senator Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I promise I don't have too much more. I beg to differ, Senator Gates, and I beg to differ in the stance that what I said yesterday, I stand by it. And I made the comment yesterday that the publisher of the map, in my opinion, was not the person that completed that map. It's not the person's work that was standing in front of us, because the map that was presented to us was not drawn in a traditional redistricting way. And I say that to say it is less compact.
Senator Davis, is there a question and not
It is.
debate?
It is.
Okay.
It's less compact, it splits more counties, and it deviates from existing boundaries more frequently used as case law has directed us to do when we're drawing maps. So I said all that to paint the picture to ask Senator Gates, how do Floridians trust the fact that we are now about to vote on a map that's even more Republican leaning than the current map, but it also doesn't address the things that I just laid out with traditional redistricting criteria?
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. President. The map drawer testified yesterday, Mr. Preda testified on behalf of the governor, that he was the only drawer of the map, that he drew the map, he drew every line in the map, although he consulted with and was advised by legal counsel in the office of the governor and other members of the governor's executive staff. He answered that question, I think, several times in the same way. The thrust of your question appears to be, how could the people of Florida trust a map that is more Republican? That's an interesting question. I think as you look at registration and the growth of registration in various political parties in the state, Republican registration has grown over the years. Florida has become more of a red state and less of a purple state. I think it was defined by Governor Bush as a purple state during his time. and now it appears more as a red state because of registration. What I believe that is presumptuous, very presumptuous, not of you, ma'am, not of you, Senator, but is presumptuous of those who say that this is a Republican map. It may be a Democratic map. I believe that the voters of Florida, listen to what Senator Pizzo said in rules yesterday. It is really up to the voters of Florida to decide not only whether this map is correct, but on the public policies that underlie this map and provoke and inspire this map. And it's the voters who will decide. And I am not persuaded, as a Republican, as a lifelong Republican, as a partisan Republican, I am not persuaded that this map is necessarily beneficial to the Republican Party.
Additional questions? Seeing none. President Gates, there is a House companion bill here. Please explain the differences if you plan to substitute.
Mr. President, it is identical.
There we go, a little identical. Senator of the 1st District, Senator Gates moves to HB 1D be withdrawn from committee, read the first and second time by title, and substituted for SB 8D. Is there objection? Seeing none, show the motion adopted. Read the House bill the first and second time by title.
House Bill 1D, a bill to be entitled An Act Establishing the Congressional Districts of the State. House Bill 1D, a bill to be entitled An Act Establishing the Congressional Districts of the State.
Are there amendments?
None on the desk, Mr. President.
Other questions? The Senator of the 1st District, Senator Gates, moves the bill be read a third time. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying yay. All those opposed, show the motion adopted. Please read the bill a third time.
House Bill 1D, a bill to be entitled An Act Establishing the Congressional Districts of the State.
To kick us off in debate, that's no, not yet. Oh, Senator Roussan in debate. You are recognized, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We are here for two reasons, neither of which have been declared political. The first reason is because there's an increase in population. There have been changes or surges in population that need to be addressed with representation. And the second reason why we're here is to make sure that the districts are all race neutral. And that's what is proposed in these maps, this map. I have a lot of concern about this map, procedurally, substantively, and in terms of its impact on the people of the state of Florida. Particularly the way the lines split and crack some of the communities I represent in Tampa Bay, and how St. Petersburg gets tied to Hardee County. Procedurally, we have not undertaken the full due diligence of analyzing these maps to understand their impact. And I served on redistricting in 2011 and 2012, when we had 26 hearings around this state. And some of you in this chamber right now accompanied me to these various locations so that we could do something novel, and that is get input, appreciate different versions of maps, and get input from the public. That has not taken place in this instance, I would argue. What we have instead is a map that, according to what we were told in committee, was worked on for 2 weeks and finished over the weekend and delivered to us 24 hours before we vote on it in committee. Does that mean that this proposed map got a full vetting And even if 90 people from the public signed up to speak and some waived their right, is that sufficient from the public to give adequate input that we should be considering? I have lived in and served Tampa Bay for decades, and I know these communities well. For example, East Tampa, a community that has faced decades of economic hardship, a community whose residents have fought long and hard simply to have their voices heard, is being cracked apart. Despite being situated currently in a relatively compact and cohesive district, these voters are being split from their neighbors and scattered into a district that stretches far away from them. Why is there such a sudden impetus to draw voters from Ybor City into the same district as Inverness in Citrus County? We were told repeatedly yesterday in committee that these districts were drawn in a race-neutral way. Is it race-neutral to split up communities made up largely of minority voters in ways that geographically make no sense otherwise? Are we to understand that these race-neutral maps coincidentally split up predominantly black voters in a way that just happens to be politically advantageous to one partisan group? In fact, we were told yesterday in committee that the map we currently have is not unconstitutional. If that's the case, then why are we even here, except for political reasons? And look at St. Petersburg, my home city. It is stretched into a district that runs all the way out toward Polk County, then down towards DeSoto County. And we know this isn't necessarily due to any geographical quirk, because for several years, as recently as 2020, we did have a district that was entirely in Pinellas County, Congressional District 13. It was clean, compact, and uncontroversial, the easiest district in the world to draw, and it was electorally competitive. But now the poorest neighborhoods in St. Pete that have already struggled to be heard will find themselves in a district contorted in such an unnatural way that they seem more like an addendum or an afterthought than full participants in the democratic process. Are those people, these constituents, really just numbers, just dots on a map, data points to be processed and manipulated? That's not democracy. This is exactly why voters in 2010 passed the Fair Districts Amendments overwhelmingly. The voters had their say, and their message was unambiguous. The map before us today is precisely what those amendments were designed to prevent. When we all took an oath to uphold the Constitution of the state of Florida, there was no fine print that said, except for parts we don't like. I don't think that's what the people of Florida elected us to do. Why aren't we here debating issues that directly impact the lives of Floridians? Issues like the cost of living, or health care access, or educational quality. That's where our focus should be. Colleagues, I urge you to join me in voting down, voting no. Again, I repeat, we're not here merely to address an imbalance in population or to decide race-conscious or race-neutral districts. But somehow we go from 20 to an increase of 24 Republican seats and the elimination of 4 Democratic seats. That's politically motivated. Thank you, Mr. President.
Additional debate. Senator Bernard.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in opposition to this map. This proposal to redraw Florida's congressional map is, in my view, an illegal and partisan gerrymander that violates both the United States Constitution and the Florida Constitution. This map is built on assumptions rather than facts. It assumes that the Fair Districts Amendment will be struck down by the U.S. Supreme Court. It assumes population changes beyond the 2020 census. Redistricting should be grounded in verified data, not speculation, especially given the significant costs involved, including legal fees, administrative burdens, and the inevitability of litigation. And make no mistake, litigation is exactly where this is headed. Recent legal reasoning makes clear that Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act must be understood as an enforcement mechanism of the 15th Amendment, of the 15th Amendment's prohibition on intentional racial discrimination. Properly interpreted, Section 2 is constitutionally sound when it is congruent with that prohibition. While it does not require direct proof of intent, it imposes liability when the circumstances create a strong inference that intentional discrimination has occurred. For example, in the Calais case, which was 92 pages long, and we received a one-page response by the governor's office, the Supreme Court stated, if a state's redistricting process produces multiple maps that include majority-minority districts, and the state cannot provide a legitimate reason for rejecting all of them, that raises a strong inference of racial motivation. In those circumstances, liability may attach without requiring courts to engage in a difficult task of determining the subjective intent of a legislative body. Gotta find it. At the same time, the Supreme Court noted, we know that the race-based decision-making in redistricting triggers strict scrutiny under the Constitution. The United States Supreme Court has recognized only two compelling interests sufficient to satisfy that standard: avoiding imminent risks to human safety in prisons and remedying specific identified instances of past discrimination. The court has now held that compliance with Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, when properly interpreted, may also qualify as a compelling interest. But that requires a careful and faithful reading of the statute, grounded in evidence, not conjecture. This proposal does not meet that standard. Equally troubling is the process by which this map has been brought forward. Now, in 2010, I served, in the Florida House, and I was on the redistricting committee in 2011 that went to 26 different public meetings across the whole state. Now, Senator Rouson went to some of the meetings. I went to every redistricting committee all across the state, from Pensacola to the Keys. We listened to communities in Jacksonville, the Villages, Lakeland, Wesley Chapel, Wauchula, Boca Raton, at FAU, Miami, Key West, Tampa, Sarasota, and Naples, and other places throughout the state. And at that time, the chair of the Senate Redistricting Committee stated, 1 second, I'm trying to get to my, all right. The chair stated, redistricting is a historic event that occurs only once every 10 years. And it is our goal to engage every Floridian in this fundamental exercise of political rights. And the chair went on to state that the purpose of those meetings was to listen, to truly understand the unique characteristics of communities across Florida. And as we're standing here today, the chair was our president, Senator Gates. I think it is fair to state that the current process does not meet that standard. This map that is before us was provided to our Senate members 24 hours before being heard in a committee. Our constituents in the state of Florida have barely had 48 hours to review this map before we're passing it today. That is not meaningful public engagement. That is not transparency, and that is not how we should conduct an exercise as fundamental as redistricting. Furthermore, this map raises serious concern under the Fair Districts Amendment. Many would argue that it reflects an effort to predetermine electoral outcomes, allowing politicians to choose their voters rather than the voters choosing their representatives. That is not how a representative democracy is meant to function. Finally, we are being asked to set aside funds to defend this map in court at a time when Floridians are struggling with real everyday challenges: the rising cost of living, fuel prices, grocery bills, property insurance, and access to health care remain pressing concerns for families across our state. Those are the issues that deserve our focus. And I would simply say to my colleagues, if we were fully addressing those concerns, there would be far less incentive to redraw maps in search of a political advantage. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Bernard. Additional debate. Senator Nathan in debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excuse me. Mr. President, I'd like to talk about duty and obligation. Not 24 hours ago, I stood right there, and I took an oath to support, protect, and defend the Constitution of the state of Florida and the Constitution of the United States of America. This is the same oath that each one of us took when we assumed our office. And that phrase, to support, protect, and defend, that phrase exists in the oath of enlistment I took when I joined the United States Navy. And now with this map, you are asking me to violate that oath. There is nothing supporting, protecting, or defending about our Constitution in this map. So, Mr. President, I rise to reject this abrogation of our duty to defend the Constitution, this abandonment of the obligation we all took. My colleagues from the legal profession have done and will continue to do an admirable job explaining exactly why to everyone in this chamber and at home, exactly why Florida does not need to engage in mid-decade redistricting. We've heard about compactness tests, the REOC ratio, convex hull, Polsby-Popper scores, and these statistical measures of strangeness, and that is what they are. They're attempting to hide a simple truth, that this map is illegal, it is unconstitutional, and all the statistical trickery in the world cannot hide that. No one is asking for illegal partisan gerrymandering. My constituents aren't banging on the door to my office. They're not calling my office asking for congressional lines to be redrawn. My constituents elected me. by 405 votes because they believe there's more to life than just surviving. So what are we here to address today? We're here because of two people. The president asked explicitly for more Republican districts, and the governor is only too happy to oblige. So, because none of this, what we are undertaking today, solves the real problems that my colleagues have mentioned, both Senator Rousseau and Senator Bernard, it doesn't address housing, it doesn't address education, it doesn't address the insurance crisis, and it certainly does not tackle property taxes. And those are the issues we should be focused on, because those are the issues I'm hearing about every single day. So I want to take a quick look at Tampa. Where I'm from, it's in my district. It has been sliced and diced to serve the governor to deliver this map. It's one of the largest and fastest growing metro areas in the state. It is now covered by no less than 3 districts, 12, 14, and 15 under this map. And those districts cover 4 counties, Hillsborough, Pasco, Hernando, and Citrus. MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa is now shoved in with Plant City on the opposite side of the county. Ybor City, a 10-minute drive from downtown Tampa, in that district that is now in Plant City, is somehow connected to Crystal River, 3 counties away. 5 minutes from my house, West Chase, now will share a representative with Hudson, over an hour away. Communities in my district and around the state deserve true, fair representation, and instead, all we are witnessing is the silencing of voices. This is patently undemocratic. It's illegal. My constituents, my neighbors, hell, my own family, we're tired of being divided into red and blue. Mr. President, this comes down to one question. Are we going to honor the oath we took, or are we going to ignore it when it becomes inconvenient? I got here because I know who I work for. It's the people I represent. I'm here to serve them, to lower the cost of living, to address fair wages, and to move our state in a better direction, and this map does none of that. So I ask all my colleagues to please vote this down. Thank you.
Additional debate. Senator Bracy Davis in debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. I know we are in a Senate and we don't clap, but if I could clap, I'd give my colleague a round of applause. I just want to say, start by saying the Calais decision did not invalidate the Voting Rights Act, full stop, okay? It did not. So the governor's theory that the map has to be race neutral is wrong. Now, let's level set and take a step back. We have all seen the national conversation. We've heard the pressure from Washington to gain midterm seats. Many of us have seen the clip of the president from some months ago when asked by a reporter how many more seats Republicans should draw, and the president very clearly said 5. He wants 5 more seats. So let's not pretend that this is happening in a vacuum. Let's not pretend that this is a real process. This is about acquiescing. This is about power. This is about relinquishing our power and giving it to the president. And we should all feel some kind of way that before it was presented to the legislature, it was presented on Fox News. It was rolled out on national media, color-coded in red and blue, as if the outcome was already decided, as if our process did not matter, as if this body and the work we are supposed to do did not matter. Colleagues, we are relinquishing our agency. We are giving up our independence as an equal branch of government. We are allowing ourselves to become an extension of other branches of government instead of a check on it. Newsflash, we don't work at the pleasure of the governor. Newsflash again, we don't work at the pleasure of the president. We were elected to represent the people of Florida. So let's talk about the process. There was a time when redistricting meant real public engagement. You heard it from Senator Rousseau. You heard it from Senator Bernard. Statewide listening tours, communities showing up, people having a voice before the lines were drawn. But yesterday, We heard that one individual drew these maps in just 2 weeks. 2 weeks, one person determining the political future of millions without any public input. That should concern every member of this body. And to add insult to injury, the map maker, Jason Pareda, stated clearly that partisan data was used. Partisan data. And at the same time, we are told this map is race neutral. So let me understand this. We are neutral when it comes to race, but intentional when it comes to party. We are colorblind, but politically calculated. We call ourselves fair in talking points, but biased in action. That is exactly the kind of partisanship the Fair District Amendment were designed to prohibit. And those amendments are clear. The Constitution prohibits drawing maps with the intent to favor or disfavor a political party. So let's call this what it is. This is gerrymandering, illegal map making designed to favor one party over another. Full stop. That's what this is. This map doesn't just tilt the scales, it shatters them. Moreover, we are here answering a question that no one asked us to answer, while ignoring the questions people are actually asking. Because I don't know what calls you are receiving in your offices, but I can tell you what people are calling me about. They are calling me about affordability. They are calling me about rising rent. They are calling me about insurance they cannot afford. They are calling me about how hard it is to stay in the great state of Florida. They are calling me to fix education. Yesterday we learned that Florida ranks 50th in the nation in teacher pay. 50th. We're at the bottom. And our students are near the bottom at SAT performance. These are the questions people are asking. These are the problems they expect us to solve. This is what we should be having a special session on. But instead, we are here. And let me tell you what this is about. This is about fear. Not just any fear, panic. The kind of panic that comes from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, when the ground is shifting beneath you and you can't win in a fair fight. Fear of losing power. Fear of losing control. Fear so deep it changes the rules, bends the Constitution, and has the nerve to call it strategy. Because when you can't persuade the people, when you can't inspire the voters, when you can't defend your record, when you can't ignore the Epstein files, you change the map. So the plan becomes simple. If you can't win with the people, you cheat the people. And the impact of this is not abstract. It is targeted. Communities like the Puerto Rican communities in Central Florida where I live, communities that are stronger together are being split apart in 5 different districts. Black and brown voices that have fought to be heard are now being weakened. That is not coincidence. That is design. So to the people back home, let me speak directly to you. Senator Gates said one thing that I agree with. He said it's now up to the voters. And he's right. Voters, you need to vote like your life depends on it, because it does. I know it can feel like this is a fixed fight. I know it can feel like the outcome has already been decided, but the real question is, voters, what are you going to do about it? We cannot sit this one out. We have to stand up. We cannot stay home. We have to show up, and you have to vote. Floridians must reclaim our voice. And to my colleagues here in the chamber, you can redraw the lines on a map, but you cannot redraw the will of the people. Vote down this bill.
Additional debate. Senator Smith.
Senators, I am not going to surprise you today by rising in strong opposition to this bill. My opinion has been made on this floor, in the halls of this building, on social media, on television, everywhere I can find to put the message out there, because me and my colleagues feel very strongly that what is happening here today is illegal. And what we are being asked to do is not just pass some routine bill. It is not consistent with the oath that each and every single one of us, members of the Florida Senate, took to uphold and defend the Constitution of the state of Florida. Let's be clear about what happened with these maps. This map was drafted in secret, outside of the sunshine, outside of the legislature on purpose, so that lawmakers would not be deposed. I hate to bring it to you, we're getting deposed. Drafted in secret, and they gave it to us 24 hours before the Senate voted on this bill in rules yesterday. 24 hours. How many of y'all got phone calls from reporters like seconds after it was posted? I need to hear your opinion, Senator. What do you think about this map? None of us knew because we hadn't seen it. We hadn't had a chance to review it. We still haven't had a chance to review it, folks. I can't tell you I'm an expert about this map because I just saw it 5 minutes ago. And so did you. That alone should raise alarm bells for anyone who believes in transparency and the democratic process. But the real problem with this map runs much deeper. This is a map that is designed and intended to rig outcomes and to benefit one political party, the Republican Party. Donald Trump's Republican Party, in direct violation of Florida's Constitution. How do I know this? I have 2 eyes, I have 2 ears, and I have a brain. We saw shifting justifications for why this map needed to move forward. I kind of lost count of how many excuses we were given for why we absolutely had to do a mid-decade redistricting process. First, it was a census undercount, which, I mean, all of you know that this doesn't address anything about an alleged census undercount. We're not getting an extra seat in Congress. That is a completely spurious point that the governor's memo opens with. I don't know what the point of that statement was. We're not getting an extra congressional seat. This doesn't change that. The other justification was, oh, well, there's a SCOTUS case that's going to be coming, and we have to get ahead of it because we're going to predict what the Supreme Court is going to say. And then the Supreme Court case never came. And then it came like literally an hour ago in the middle of our discussion that we were trying to barrel through with this map regardless of what the ruling said. Then we were told, oh, no, this is actually about malapportionment. And so that's the reason what we've got to do it. So I got to give them credit. The governor and his team have been somewhat disciplined in making sure that they never said the quiet part out loud. That the real reason this was happening is because, yes, Florida's trying to rig these maps to keep Trump's Republican Party in power. He was really careful never to say that out loud because he knows that that's blatantly illegal. Of course, until yesterday, he sent his team to our committee to just openly tell us, Senators, we don't have to comply. We don't have to comply. That was stated over and over again. We don't have to comply, we don't have to comply, we don't have to comply, we don't have to comply. What were they saying we didn't have to comply with? The Constitution. That's what they were telling us we didn't have to comply with. Which, by the way, they did this as a strategy on purpose to numb the public, to take the shock value out of what they were doing, to take the shock value out of the obvious criminality that is intertwined in this illegal map, the in-your-face lawlessness. It might seem less egregious if it is openly admitted in the Senate Rules Committee. Senators, Article 3, Section 20A is not optional as it relates to complying. It explicitly prohibits partisan gerrymandering. 63% of Florida voters approved this standard. It doesn't matter if we agreed with it or not. They approved it. They didn't make any exceptions. They didn't give us any wiggle room. None. Zero. They didn't ask us to, hey, can you reassess the Constitution? Can you reinterpret that? What do you think might happen if a future court says, maybe that's not such a good idea? That's not what they asked us to do. They didn't ask us to ignore it. They told us clearly that drawing maps to benefit one party over another is illegal. Have I mentioned this is illegal? Maybe I should mention it again. This is illegal, and that's exactly what is in front of us today. Sad to say, this is also not a legitimate process. It is not. 56% of voters recently, just in case any of y'all are wondering, well, maybe the voters have changed their minds. Maybe they saw what California did, and maybe they saw what Virginia did, and now they're incensed, and they're like, oh, we have to respond. We have to respond to what the Democrat states are doing. Senators, 56% of Floridians recently polled said that they oppose mid-decade redistricting altogether. They don't care what happened in California. They don't care what happened in Virginia. They want us focused on real issues. They want us working on tackling rising property insurance. They want us to deal with skyrocketing utility bills, the cost of living that is squeezing families across the state. But instead, we're debating in a rushed, legally questionable at best manner that divides our communities for political gain. And I do want to talk about those communities, namely the one I represent in Central Florida. We've heard repeatedly that this map is race neutral. I call BS. I call much more, but this is the Florida Senate. That claim that this map is race neutral does not hold up to even the most basic scrutiny. In Central Florida, when you look at that map that I asked President Gates about, it goes out of its way to slice and dice the Puerto Rican and Hispanic and Latino community. In multiple districts, breaks them up into 4 or 5 congressional districts rather than allowing the minority-majority district to stand. That is textbook racial cracking. It dilutes their voting power on purpose. It weakens the power of the Hispanic community at the polls. And frankly, I think it's a slap in the face to some of the same Latino voters who gave Trump a chance. And it raises serious questions under the 14th Amendment. And by the way, that cracking of the Hispanic and Latino community in Central Florida is not accidental. It's intentional. That's why I think the bogus claim that these maps are race neutral is absolute nonsense. And we are here being asked to accept a legal theory that borders on absurdity. I'm not sure that it borders it. It is absurd. The governor's argument is that parts of the Constitution, he says the Constitution is not constitutional. Make that make sense. I never heard that before. The Constitution's not constitutional. Don't follow it. What? Are you kidding me? He's asking us to ignore the law. And yeah, we got the ruling just now. The SCOTUS case in Louisiana, it did not overturn Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Newsflash, it took us a half an hour, an hour to figure this out, But breaking news, the Voting Rights Act is still the law, senators. It's still the law. Oh, also, in case you missed it, the Fair Districts Amendment of Florida's Constitution is still the law. It's the law. The legal foundation for this map does not exist. It blocks the governor's legal theory, what just came from this ruling. So what are we left with? We're left with an executive branch that hauled us to Tallahassee by force, telling us that we don't have to comply. We don't have to comply with the Constitution we all swore to uphold. A process that has sidelined our institution as an independent, deliberative body, even though map drawing is our constitutional responsibility. Sure, the governor has a right to present his map. Any member of the public has a right to present a map. Doesn't mean that we have to pass it. This map is clearly designed to entrench power rather than reflect the will of the people. I think it's important that we talk about the oath again, folks. We all swore an oath. And we heard earlier repeatedly, hey, this map is a legal theory. It's a legal theory. Maybe we should let this legal theory play out. Senators, I took the same oath you did. And the oath that I took was not, I, Carlos Guillermo Smith, swear to test a legal theory here in the legislature. That is not the oath I took. Was it yours? I took an oath to uphold and defend Florida's Constitution. That's the oath that I took. My husband was smiling, just ear to ear. Other people didn't seem that happy when I was taking my oath. But that was the oath that I took. Senators, repeatedly telling us that we don't need to comply with the Constitution doesn't mean that we shouldn't. We are not here to follow orders. We're a co-equal branch of government. And I would say we must comply. We must comply with the oath that we took. It doesn't matter what happened in Texas. It doesn't matter what happened in California. It doesn't matter what happened in Virginia. But folks, if we really believe that this proposal is right and true, why haven't we taken it to the voters? Why haven't we asked the voters for approval, as they did in California, as they did in Virginia? It's because we know it will fail. This moment is about more than the lines. It's about whether we uphold the rule of law. I will not support a map that is illegal, that is rigged in order to appease an authoritarian who believes that he is king of the United States of America. We don't have kings in this country. Our country was founded on that very idea. And senators, it actually only takes a few of you to stop this. I counted the votes. I saw the Rules Committee. I counted how many people are here in this chamber. Just 3 more. Just 3 more of you is what stops this from moving forward. Remember your oath. And to the people back at home who are watching, who are feeling hopeless, who believe that this rigged map intended to deliver more seats to Donald Trump's Republican Party means that they maybe should just give up or capitulate, I want you to remember what happened in Hungary. I want you to remember how the people of Hungary recently stood up against authoritarianism, how they overcame all of the obstacles and the rigged and illegal process that was put forward in front of them to actually take a stand for their country and for what's right. And they won, regardless of those obstacles. We need you to vote. There is hope, and we can save our state. Thank you, senators.
Any other debate? Senator Pizzo.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to apologize to my friend President Gates because I can't vote for this bill today. The reason why I cannot vote for this bill today is because I am not prepared. I fancy myself a fairly intelligent individual. I would venture to say that I would fare okay in a standardized test of the 90 pages released today. Probably better than most, but I would fail. I don't know what I don't know. Recently, not to get into any detail, I took over pro bono as an attorney in a case, pretty complicated case in your district. And I begged the court for a continuance because I was not prepared. I had not been able to give proper treatment and deliberation to the volume and mass of information that was available. It's not just the 47 pages of dissent that follow the 37 pages of opinion. It's the cases that it talks about, that it implicates, that it includes. So I am not prepared for class today. And I simply, for that reason, cannot vote no. I can't speak to the great certainty that many people have spoken here today with great particularity and vigor about, they're so certain about their legal positions, having never gone to law school. God bless you. I'm not prepared. I'm just not prepared. What I am prepared is for this. It doesn't matter how long Jason Pareda took. We're about 2 months away from where a guy named Thomas Jefferson took the same amount of time to draft the Declaration of Independence. 2 weeks is enough. I mean, Adams and Franklin made some edits, but it only took him 2 weeks to do Declaration of Independence. He did it with candlelight and without a laptop, okay? But with the same voracious debate and enthusiasm that those in opposition so far to this point have had in this bill, you just got handed a gift. You guys should just blue wave this midterm. You guys should be winning every seat. I mean, if this is the ultimate, what I talked about 3 years ago, which has now been taken as a tagline for one political party, 3 years ago I sat right where I think Jen Bradley was on my left where Tracy Davis is, and I was in the seat to the right. Chev was behind me over my right shoulder. Janet Cruz was behind me, and I go, listen, guys, we're talking about a bill, and I go, listen, the pendulum's going to swing. Might not be today, might not be tomorrow, or next year, or next decade, but it's going to swing. And what you don't want, and Senator Hooper was right in front of me, I think he actually agreed with me when I said this, what you don't want is the gluttony and greed that you're exercising today because you just because you can. You don't want that to come back and bite you. You want to have grace and compassion and be fair. So here's where we are. If it's so bad, if it's violative of constitutional rights and what the voters wanted and all of those things, then you guys should clean up in November. I mean, you should win every seat that's up. Or maybe you won't. Or maybe our voters will vote for a particular person or idea or who they think represents their feelings. Why does a majority white Republican district vote for a black guy? Why does an overwhelming conservative district vote for a woman who drove a Subaru at the time? Can you believe that? Anything's possible. You know, I was going to fit that in at some point. So let me just say this. I don't know what I don't know. And I'm smart enough and confident to know that I don't know what I don't know yet. And that's why I can't vote for it. I'm just not ready. Maybe we should have not rolled this today. I don't know. I had this on my dance card until Friday. But Ben Sass is dying of pancreatic cancer. And he's dying slowly the way my dad did. So he's got great clarity. And he said on 60 Minutes, you should all watch it. It's really great. It doesn't matter who you are or where you're from. And he said, Congress is right now just so unproductive. And they should be the deliberative, boring, and trustworthy body. Let's get off social media, guys. Let's not do these things for social media. Because he said that smackdown of social media is nonsense. Let's be boring and trustworthy and deliberative. Let's read. Let's do our homework. I have not. I am not prepared. I can't vote for it. If you told me to come back in a week, I might change my mind. But I want to be honest with all of you. I'm not calling anybody out. I would do better on the test than you would. We're not prepared.
Senator Polsky?
Thank you, Madam President. I'm going to try a different angle today. We're going to continue to talk about the oath because it's really important. So I rise today to speak in opposition to this redistricting proposal. And I want to begin, what we've heard before, with a reminder that every single member of this chamber has taken an oath. We swore to uphold the Constitution of the state of Florida, not the Constitution when it's convenient, not the Constitution when it helps our party, the Constitution in full, without reservation. And that Constitution, ratified not by politicians, not by lobbyists, not by party bosses, but by the people of Florida, in an overwhelming majority in 2010, contains a clear and unambiguous provision. Congressional districts shall not be drawn to favor a political party or an incumbent. That's not my opinion. That's the law of the state, passed by Florida voters with more than 63% support. They didn't whisper it. They didn't suggest it. They enshrined it. And today, this body is being asked to tear it up. Let's be honest about where this proposal comes from, because the trail isn't hard to follow. Shortly before the governor announced his push to redraw Florida's congressional maps mid-decade, Donald Trump issued an explicit call to Republican governors across the country, only Republican governors, not a subtle nudge, not a quiet suggestion, an explicit call to redraw congressional lines for the clearly stated purpose of giving Republicans a better chance to pick up seats in the upcoming midterms. That was the stated purpose, partisan gain said out loud. Now the governor of Florida has been careful not to repeat those words. He's too savvy for that. But his justifications, every single one of them, have crumbled under the slightest scrutiny. First, we were told this was necessary because of a pending Supreme Court case, a case that was going to force our hand, a case that required urgent action, even though at the time, of course, we didn't have it. So interesting that the decision dropped today, isn't it? Interesting that this case, though they hoped for it to justify this redistricting, it does not, in fact. Does it make it harder? Yes. But the Supreme Court did not overturn Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. We all have to know that. It does not ban the consideration of race entirely from redistricting. So then we were told this was about Florida's rapid growth. The state has grown, that's true. And if fair representation were genuinely the concern, it would be a worthy conversation. But that argument fails, and it fails on two separate grounds. First, we do not have mid-decade census data. The Census Bureau has not given us new numbers. We are still operating on 2020 figures. If the governor is truly concerned about accurate representation based on population, he does not have the data to draw the maps. The map, single map. You cannot justify a redraw on population growth you cannot measure. And second, and this question deserves a direct answer from the other side of the aisle, if the governor is genuinely worried about Floridians being fairly represented, why has he proposed redrawing congressional lines but said nothing, not one word, about redrawing state legislative districts? Florida's state legislative districts were drawn from the same 2020 census data. They are subject to the same population shifts. If growth is the real concern, why does it only seem to affect the maps that determine who sits in the United States Congress? The selective nature of this proposal is not a coincidence. It is a confession. Madam President, I want to speak directly to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle because I know there are members over there who have reservations about this, who understand in their hearts what this is. Political parties come and go. Majorities shift. The party that engineers the maps today may find itself on the other side of those maps tomorrow. But constitutional norms, once broken, are very hard to restore. And the trust of the people of Florida, once lost, is even harder to win back. The voters of this state looked at a political system they didn't trust, and in 2010, they took matters into their own hands. They said, not here, not in our state. You do not get to draw the lines that choose your own voters. That is how we differ from all the other states that have been discussed. They said it clearly, they said it loudly, and they said it by a margin that left no room for reinterpretation. We took an oath to honor that decision. I am asking this chamber to keep that oath. Vote no on this redistricting proposal. Stand with the Constitution. Stand with the voters who put that provision out there. And stand with the principle that in the state of Florida, the people choose their representatives don't choose them. I want to appeal to the Florida Supreme Court to follow the law. You were all appointed to do just that, not to be political rubber stamps. This is potentially the most consequential vote any of us will make. When you put your head down on the pillow tonight, will you say to yourself, I voted according to the Constitution, the laws, and for the people of my district and the state? Or will you say, I voted for my political party? Thank you, Madam President, and fellow members for doing the right thing today.
Any other debate? Senator Sharif.
Colleagues, I am prepared for debate. See, I'm really good at math, and I'm good at pop quizzes too. And I got the statistical card on this one. And so I stand today in opposition of this map, not based on just the illegality of it, but it's about a contract. It's about a contract that we made between voters and the government. And we're changing that midstream. You can't do that because the consequences are not just prospective, they're retroactive. Because we're changing the value and the meaning of votes that were already cast. It reaches backwards and it just distorts our elections and what's already happened. And when we talk about maps and we talk about looking at data in terms of partisan and not taking race into consideration, it's statistically impossible to not say that race doesn't play a part in partisanship. If we take the statistics of the state of Florida and we look at the Democrats, which represent 4 million registered voters, the Republicans represent 5.5 million registered voters, and the MPAs and other represent 3.3 million. If you look at that, and you look at those statistics, and you proffer what's been said today, which is that the maps that we previously took into consideration were severely impacted by racial influence, then this chamber shouldn't look like this. Because if you take the statistics and the data, and you have something that is severely impacted by a minority consideration, a Republican majority would not remain in the House and in the Senate. That would mean that there would be a different amount of Democrats. There wouldn't be 12 Democrats in 40. And over in the House, you wouldn't have that supermajority. So what does this mean when you say that race is not a factor? Partisanship dictates that under the Democratic Party, with the 4 million voters that I just talked about, Black and African Americans represent 80 to 90% of those. White non-Hispanics represent 30 to 40% of those, and Hispanic and Latino, which is often rolled into the white vote, is 40 to 50%. Asians are a very small percentage of that. The Republican vote is 5.5 million. Only 10% of those are Black people or African American. White non-Hispanic votes represent 55 to 65% of Republicans. Hispanic and Latino, 45 to 55%. And Asians are a very small percentage. NPAs have 3.3 million. Black and African Americans are represented by a very small margin. White and non-Hispanic by a moderate percentage. And Hispanic and Latino is very high in the NPA, a no party affiliation or other. That's the number that we have to look at when we are talking about this particular map. Because we already knew where the Democrats were when you drew the map and you drew the boundaries. We knew where they were because we can see from the map that they've been isolated in certain pockets. And then in others, they've been diluted by carrying a tip of a majority-minority neighborhood into it. But Hispanic and Latino populations had to be split multiple times because they represent the 3.3 million that became the determining factor of whether or not these districts were able to be turned purple or whether they were able to be solidly red. And what you saw on Fox News when they put the colors up was exactly this. This is why the map looks the way it looks on Fox News. They don't have a crystal ball. They have math. They have statistics, and numbers don't lie. Numbers can be manipulated to your favor, but numbers don't lie. When you go into your driver's license place and you register for your driver's license and they ask you to register to vote, they ask you your race, they ask you what your party affiliation is, what your address is, and your date of birth, and you give it to them, and the data is determined by what you've given and what you put in the system. And so if I consider myself an African American female and I go in and I register as an African American female and a Democrat, then you can pretty much tell where I'm at. You know where my address is. So when you're doing these maps for data purposes and you look for an address of a Black woman who's a Democrat, gonna pull me up really easily, and I don't have to say a word. And you can say, you took my address into consideration and not race, but you also said, and they said it 3 times in committee yesterday, that they took partisan data into consideration when they made the maps. So when I went home, I do what I always do. I like math. So I sat down and I looked at the math. And this math doesn't lie. And so if we're talking about not taking race into consideration, then you shouldn't have taken partisanship into consideration either, because that is a telltale sign of race. And you cannot deny it because the numbers don't lie. It's on the state system right now. If you pull up the Florida Division of Elections office right now, and you pull up the Democrat Party and Republican Party affiliation, and you look at race and you break it down, those numbers do not lie. And when I looked at the Broward County map, they didn't lie. And so today when I first came in here today, I was just debating based on the numbers. And the situation and the results of the Calais case didn't change my debate today. That's why I'm prepared. If the prior maps were truly dominated by race as the primary factor, we would have expected electoral outcomes to reflect that influence across the map, and it did not. But what we actually see is a sustained Republican supermajority in both chambers. That's not evidence of a system overly driven by race. It's evidence of a system where race was considered in limited legal required ways, while partisan outcomes remained dominant. the 14th Amendment, if it still stands when I walk out the door today, that law does not prohibit consideration of race. It prohibits predominance of race without justification. Compliance with voting rights protections requires that race be considered in certain circumstances that is not unconstitutional. It is required. In a state where party registration is divided and millions of voters are unaffiliated, the existence of a strong Republican majority is not consistent with a system supposedly skewed to favor minority representation through race. If anything, it demonstrates that race has not overridden broader electoral dynamics. It worked in your favor. And now you're going to redistrict midstream to change it. If it doesn't scream illegal to you, it ought to just scream unfair and unjust. And in a place where I stand, where my ancestors stood, and where I have over 6 generations of representation to get to this point, with that little black girl from a place in Miami, standing to be a state senator before you today, if I can do it with these things in my way, and these obstacles that we've been put before us for many, many years and many decades, and you can survive this. All of us can. But what we can't do is change the law to favor our preferences. That's what makes this illegal, and that's what makes it unjust. And for that reason, I'm asking you, colleagues, to please vote down on this today. Thank you.
Further debate? Senator Berman.
Thank you, Madam President. So we did hear a lot about taking our oath, and yesterday we're so proud to have sworn in a new senator. And I'm sure we can all remember when we were there. We raised our hand, we took our oath, and our oath wasn't just to the United States Constitution, but to the Florida Constitution as well. The same Florida Constitution that we are being asked to trample today. We asked the governor's people why in their letter they didn't refer to the Florida Constitution, and they didn't really give us an answer. And the reason is because they were asking us to violate the Florida Constitution. They're asking us to violate the Fair Districts Act. I have not heard one person say that this is a legitimately good map that would benefit our state. I've heard it's a map, not high praise. I've heard that it follows the U.S. Constitution, but not that it's good, not that it's needed, and not that it will give more voice to the voters who should be electing their politicians and not the other way around. How could it be? It was drawn by one person in secret. Not one of my constituents asked for a new map. My constituents are asking for the things that you heard about here on this floor. They're asking about affordability. They're asking about their property insurance. They want to make sure they have health care, that they can pay their utilities, their rent, that their children get a great education. That's what we should be spending time on, not on this. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the wonkier legal issues, because I think we have to set the table a little bit so that we understand everything about how we got here. Oops, get my map, get back where I was. Okay. So yesterday in committee, the lawyers were asked a key question. And the question was, is the governor's map is based on a legal theory underpinned by 2 ifs. 1, if Calais comes out and makes consideration of race unconstitutional. And 2, that the Florida Supreme Court agrees that the racial minority part of fair districts are non-severable from the partisan gerrymandering. the governor's lawyer agreed that his case supporting the map depended on these two ifs. Well, Calais came out today, and the first if was a no. Calais does not make considering race in redistricting unconstitutional. That is very, very clear. It doesn't change that part of the law. So the governor's legal theory fails on the first if. And so, by their lawyer's own admission, the legal theory underpinning the maps fails. Fair districts, including the ban on partisan gerrymandering, is still the law of the land. What was true before this morning, that Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act was the law, is still true this afternoon. What was true before this morning, that fair districts was the law, is still true this afternoon. We have seen the clear language in fair districts, and that is that partisan gerrymandering is prohibited under the law. And while the governor didn't come out and say it, other members of his party did. And then yesterday, his own staff came out and said they prepared the maps using partisan data. So there is no question that what was done is clearly unconstitutional and illegal. No one has said that the previous map is unconstitutional. There's no reason we have to be here today. When we've done mid-decade redistricting, we have done it for the purpose that the courts ordered us to do this. That is not the case here. We don't have to do anything. There is no requirement that we do this here today. I would love to see us stand up as the co-equal branch of government that we are and say to the governor, no, we are not going to do this illegal activity. You know, I think that there was a little bit, I guess it's called a malapropism, when we heard today about what we should do with this map. But I am going to ask all of you to do that. And what I would like everybody here to do is dispose. Dispose meaning discard this map. And I ask all of you to vote no and dispose of this map. Thank you.
Any other debate? Senator Osgood.
Thank you, Madam President. And thank all of you for sharing your opinions and your stance today. For me, I stand today at the intersection of democracy and dignity. I have to remember the oath I took, but I also have to remember who I'm in covenant with as I live from day to day. And I think what we are witnessing is not just a simple policy shift. It's a coordinated restructuring of democracy itself. When we think about the map that we have now, I combined it with the federal executive order ensuring citizenship verification and integrity in federal elections, our own Florida version of the SAVE Act. And I think collectively they represent a dangerous convergence of power, politics, and voter suppression. I believe that the Florida Constitution, through the Fair District Amendment, explicitly prohibits partisan gerrymandering. That's packing and cracking of any group of people, regardless if they're white, black, or Hispanic. And yet we have this proposed map shifting Florida's delegation to be specific to Broward County. We are losing 2 Democratic seats in Broward County. It's like if I have my hand and somebody just cut off 2 fingers for no reason. whole hand working, no complaining, good, strong hand, and then I just lose 2 fingers for no apparent reasons. I can't explain that to the voters. But community like mine feel some kind of way when these things happen by government, feel like they're being targeted and attacked. And I'm not going to presuppose or insult anybody by trying to determine what they're thinking. I have a background in public administration, not psychology or psychiatry or any of that. But I listen at people and how they feel and what they share. And what's difficult for me is, regardless of what political party you're in, when people say government, y'all, that's inclusive of all of us. They see us all together. And as we find ourselves in this moment with these maps, we have to really ask ourselves, is political power that important? So important that we prioritize it over people. I think we're setting a dangerous precedent. Redistricting is supposed to occur once a decade. And we can argue, I let you lawyers do what you do, I'm not a lawyer, if it's legal, unconstitutional. But for me, I ask myself, is it moral? Is it the right thing to do? I go through these series of questions, and I'm sure you do too. Is it politically motivated? Is it nationally coordinated? What about the timing? Eliminating 2 congressional districts in Broward County. How do I reconcile that to voters in my county? I keep hearing us say a lot about race. It really, really confuses me, because I believe that God created us in his image. I wish we could just get away from all of this race stuff. What does it really mean? Does it mean black people and white people? Does it mean black, white, and Hispanic? It's relative to what we're talking, when we're talking about whatever we're talking about. But I can tell you that it keeps us divided, and it keeps us in a position that we have a system that has this whole notion of this value gap, where we use this bad word called race to determine who gets what, when, and why. And it's not God's thing. He created us all in his image. We're all his children. Really wish I could ban that word. Cause a lot of harm. Cause a lot of us to be at odds when we shouldn't be. If we saw all ourselves as equal people and equal value, and we work to provide for each other what we want for ourselves, I think we could govern better. And as I continued to think about this whole time of where we're at, and for me, I connect the dots. So the March 2026 executive order mandates federal involvement in voter verification system. Now, to me, this undermines a fundamental principle that states, not the federal government, administers elections. It raises serious constitutional concerns about government overreach and coercion. I'm required because of the covenant that who I'm in covenant with as I live from day to day. So let me just say it like this. I'm required to act justly, love mercifully, and walk humbly with God. And what we're doing here today for me is not just, it's not merciful, and it's certainly not about being humble. It's about using power to gain more power. Let me move to our Florida version of the SAVE Act that we went through in the original legislative session that requires proof of citizenship and expand verification systems. But in practice, it removes voters that cannot quickly verify documentation. it disproportionately impacts, I believe, seniors, black and brown voters, women, and low-income residents. For me, it's a clear signal that we're sending a message that we're trying to stop voters. And when we combine these things collectively, the government, federal government, state government, local government, most people don't even know what the roles of each are. It's just the government. When we combine the gerrymandered map, the federal voter verification mandates, and state-level citizenship restrictions, we create a certain kind of system. We create a system where districts are predetermined, voters are filtered, and outcomes are engineered. And for me, brothers and sisters, that's an erosion of democracy. This guy, Amos, had a nickname called Prophet, talks about justice rolling down like water and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. When we make decisions like we're making today in the way that we're doing it, we set up political dams that keep water. We know when water flows, it nourishes everything it touches. But we continue to have public policy after public policy, decisions that are made that stops the water from flowing to certain places, certain groups of people. So again, for me, it's not just about the oath I took. It's about who I live in covenant with every day. And for those reasons, I cannot accept a future where maps choose voters, laws exclude citizens, and power overrides principles. In a democracy, voters are supposed to choose their leaders. But actions like this suggest that we're using our authority to choose voters. And in closing, brothers and sisters, it's your decision, it's your choice. I wouldn't insult you by trying to tell you what choice to make. But remember, we're still writing history every day. We're writing the days of our life. Some of us are living bold and beautiful. Others are living young and restless. Some are living as the world turns one day at a time. They really don't care. But remember, your vote and your decision will say where you stood. Did you stand on the side of power? Will you stand on the side of power? Or will you stand on the side of the people? I'm voting no, because I'm standing with the people.
You have Senator Arrington.
Thank you, Madam President. Members, we are here today not to just debate and vote on a map, but to decide whether we will honor the Constitution of the state of Florida and pass a gerrymandered, partisan drawn map. If you look at the map in District 9, which is my area, you can look at how many rural counties are packed into that district. If you've been to Osceola or Orange County, where there's high growth, has been and continues to be, why would you add Indian River County, Highlands County, Okeechobee County, and Glades County? Do you think that your constituents in these rural counties want to be represented by someone in Osceola County or someone in Orange County? Or do you want them to be included with Osceola and Orange County's priorities? And coincidentally, in this district, a majority-minority district with over 55% Hispanic residents, it has been split between multiple districts to weaken their voting power, 4 to 5 districts. And this district, as Senator Smith talked about, spans over 120 miles. How long will it take their representative in Congress to attend an event or visit their counties and talk to their constituents? These folks are not going to get representation. In 2010, Florida voters were clear. Our Republicans, Democrats, and Independents overwhelmingly passed the Fair Districts Amendment. They did so for one simple reason: to end partisan gerrymandering. The language is clear. Districts may not be drawn to favor or disfavor a political party. That is not a suggestion. That is a constitutional mandate. And yet the map before us today does exactly what the Constitution prohibits. It is being advanced in a mid-decade special session. You're right, Senator Gates, it's a mouthful. Because of politics, because of power. And we've all seen the map that's colored in red and blue blocks to represent the proposed districts that was released to Fox News before it was sent to us. And think about that. How many times are we going to keep cashing the governor's check that he writes without even talking to us? It's not embarrassing, it's embarrassing and it's disrespectful, as Senator Jones said yesterday in committee. This map is illegal. This map is expected to increase one party's representation by multiple seats. That outcome is not incidental, it is intentional. And when intent is to advantage one party over another, that is a direct violation of the Fair Districts Amendment. This is not just about lines on a map that were supposedly drawn by one person over the last 2 weeks. As it was said, this is about whether voters choose their representatives or whether representatives get to choose their voters. And the people of Florida already answered that question at the ballot. They put it in our Constitution. Our responsibility is not to reinterpret their will. Our responsibility is to uphold their will. And if we pass this illegal map, we are telling Floridians that their vote, their voice, and even their Constitution can be set aside for political gain. I will not do that. I urge this body to reject this partisan-drawn, gerrymandered map and stand by the side of fairness, due process, transparency, and the rule of law. Thank you.
Additional debate. Senator Davis in debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. Wow, you all have heard a lot, and we appreciate you being attentive to that. But this is a heavy deal. I remember the redistricting in the House, and now we're drawing new lines in the Senate. I stand up to say that I am probably one of a few people in this room that truly understand some or most of this terminology. And I agree with you, Senator Pizzo, when he says we're not ready. You're absolutely right. We're not ready because the last time the Senate did something like this, it was a combined 8 hours specifically to just inform and educate senators. 9 hours to consider the 13 different congressional map options, and another 4 hours for the final committee consideration. But yet we were given a map in, what, a day, expected to understand it, go through it, understand how the lines were drawn, but most of us don't understand the terminology of packing and cracking and the jingles, the Thornburg versus jingles part 1 and 2. We're not ready. And you've heard my colleagues say how we're getting ready to cash a check. You've heard my colleagues talk about power, and that's what this is. But all session, this chamber has talked about trust. Trust. Trust who? Who are we asking Floridians to trust? Because they're not going to trust us with what we're doing here. For you to sit in this room and say, this isn't about partisan gerrymandering. This isn't about racial gerrymandering. This isn't about gaining more seats. This isn't about making a Republican-leaning map more Republican-leaning. This isn't about gaining more seats because we want to stay in power and in charge. Well, we have some articles here that say differently. And just like I have them, you should have them too. Let's start with a gubernatorial candidate that today I won't call the name, but I'm sure you know, says Florida should counter Democrats by redistricting. Should do it. Especially when they say that's illegal here. It is. You've already heard it. Leader Berman has already said the Fair District Amendment is still the law of the land. The Voting Rights Act is still the law of the land, has not changed. The second article said, but it's not about power, it's not about gaining more seats because we can stay in charge. DeSantis plots to end run of Florida's law to create more GOP House seats. This is exactly what an illegal, partisan gerrymander is. Yeah, you all are looking at us straight in our face and saying, no, that's not what this is. The reason I question Mr. Pareda like I did is because I've worked with him before, just like many of you. Spent a lot of hours in his office along with Ms. Lita Kelly when we were drawing maps in the House. So when I say to you that wasn't his work, I mean it. When I say to you that this map performs poorly, it does. And until you tell me different, because no test has been done, that's where I'm going to stand. It performs poorly. It's going to perform poorly than the current map. It's not following any of the traditional criteria, none. It's less compact, though we went back and forth about that. I have the numbers. Everybody else should have them. It splits more counties, and it deviates from existing boundaries. You've heard it. My colleagues have talked about Orlando. They've talked about how Tampa is split, and they also have talked about how Broward is split. It does. And for this to be something we're doing without preparation, without going through, without hours of education, and just signing a blank check because that's what the governor wants to do, I'm glad I'm standing on the other side of this illegal gerrymandering of a map, because that's what it is. I'm going to say that word over and over again, because for the people that are watching, this is a clip. And I want folks to understand that this is a illegal, partisan gerrymander. It's illegal. It's illegal because the Fair District Act still exists today. It's illegal because the Voting Rights Act still exists today. It's illegal. And if folks don't hear anything we say, they're going to know this is illegal. This is not about it's not about population. It's not about race neutral. This is a blatant, illegal, partisan gerrymander. I talked a lot about the REOC scores and the Polsky-Popper scores and thank you, Senator, and the convex hull, which I couldn't think of the name for. Again, terminology and formulas, most of us have no clue as to what that means and how it was used. Probably wasn't, but it was told to us that's how we got the compactness scores. Those are formulas you use for the compactness scores. Mr. Popper was someone who testified before us. And this score and these maps are lower than his scores. A compactness expert is the point I'm trying to make. Besides that, that's the technical part of what I wanted to talk to you all about. We had a room of probably 100 people, 50 people come to say, do not do this. Don't do this. We have a tendency not to listen to our constituents when they come to talk to us. But I appreciate our rules chair for allowing everyone to speak yesterday. But I took notes, and I want to remind you of some of the things your constituents came up to Tallahassee to say to you about this map. Don't change the rules. Don't take the power from the voters through this predetermined outcome. End this partisan practice. Stop wasting taxpayers' dollars that may have been mine. Corruption when diversity of opinions are silenced. Listen to what the voters are saying. You've heard the numbers all day. My colleagues have told you all day. Voters, Republicans, Democrats, they don't like this. They gave you the number. I think it was like 56%. This is not what our voters want us to do. Vote on a map to decide within 24 hours. Don't support this map. No regard to Florida Fair District Amendment. 56% of your voters surveyed do not want mid-decade redistricting. We want fairness, equal representation, black, white, brown, yellow, of all people. That was just some of the things they said. But we're moving forward, and we're going to do this. And I know nothing I say will change anyone's mind. But I'm going to say this. Just because something is legal does not make it right. I'm also going to say this. We listened to Jason Pareda, who told us he published the map. I told you, I don't believe that. We also listened to the governor's attorney, who told you they don't have to follow the law. I will remind some of you that that is the same attorney that represented the governor in opposition of one of our very own. In opposition of one of our very own. Saying she wasn't qualified to return to this chamber. Obviously, his argument was unanimously rejected by the Florida Supreme Court. That's the same attorney. So I ask you, why should we trust what he says about this map? Instead of doing what Floridians deserve, and that's allowing them to have freedom to choose their leaders because they know who best will look out for their future interests. You've heard it over and over. People who will take care of their children, their families, their communities, not us, not the politicians who are only looking out for their own political ambitions. But we talk about trust. They're not going to trust us. They're not going to trust you. What we need to do is get back to the work of doing the job that we, senators, us, were elected to do. Lowering costs, raising wages, and creating a more affordable, brighter future for all Floridians, not diluting or diminishing their voting power. And that's another subject I didn't even talk about. But we sit here, we decide this map, hopefully it goes into litigation, which I know it will, and then what do the supervisors of elections do to make all of this happen for these very same voters? How much is that going to cost us? We have a job to do. We have a job to do. And the job is to support the people who elected us to represent them. And this is not what we're doing here today.
Additional debate, Senator Jones.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. And to members, I know the time here is late, so I'm not going to be long. I don't know if you all have ever read the book Profiles in Courage, John F. Kennedy. In 2015, Mr. President, I had the opportunity to go to the Harvard Business School for 3 weeks when I first got elected, and that was one of the books that they asked us to read, Democrats, Republicans, all within this room. And I always grew fond of a quote that was inside the book by John F. Kennedy, and he said that the stories of past courage can define that ingredient. They can teach, they can offer hope, they provide inspiration. But here's the best part I love. It says, but they cannot supply courage itself. For this, each man must look into his own soul. John F. Kennedy said that in Profiles of Courage. Then I thought about it, that when my cousins and I, when we were younger, Senator Roussan, we would go to the park and play, Jason Pizzo. And when we would go to the park and play, sometimes we would get into trouble. Because there'd be other individuals with my cousins, they wanted to fight us. And we go back to my grandma. My grandma said, y'all go back to that park, and you better not come back if y'all not gonna win. And you better put up a good fight. That's what I'm telling you all about Washington, D.C. What I'm telling you all about Washington, D.C. is we don't have to do this because Washington told us to. Cousins, Senate, we can go back, we can put up this fight and punch back for the people of this state. Why? Because I think I heard Senator Sharif said it, and I said it yesterday, because we had a deal with the people of Florida. And I'll be very clear. I'm not going to go over many of the things that has already been said by many of my colleagues, because you got the point. But I don't want you all to think for 2 seconds that the speeches that you are hearing are speeches because this is just any kind of old bill that we're voting on right now. This is not just any kind of bill. What we're about to vote on today is America and the people of this state, and they are looking at us to ask us the question, are we going to continue this testing of the breaking down of our democratic process? Nobody in this room can say that you don't see it. In 2010, you heard it, the people of this state, they signed a contract with us because they put what they wanted on the ballot. And they gave us their decision. 63% of them did. They passed the Fair Districts Amendment to stop partisan gerrymandering. You know the language, you know it. You know what section is in because you've heard it since we've been down here. To prevent what? To prevent diminishment of minority voting strength. Not politicians, not parties, the people. And those amendments are still the law today. And many of you have said it. Those are not, and they were not suggestions. They were mandates from the people. Just like the 14th Amendment, it was a mandate. And just like our Constitution, it's a mandate. There's nothing wrong with our Constitution. I said it yesterday. There's nothing wrong with the 14th Amendment. I said it yesterday. And still to this day, members, there is nothing wrong with the Fair District Act. And I get it. And Senator Pizzo, you're right. I'm no attorney. Sometimes I wish I was one because y'all are good sometimes. But I do understand the letter of the law to the extent to how, not just how it's explained, but also what it is and how it reads on paper, because I can't read. And I know you all can too. I'm going to skip a lot of this, what I was going to say, and I'm going to pull out one thing, and I'm going to close, because again, everything else already has been said, and I debated yesterday. And that is the trust of this process with the people. If you can't roll with me on anything else, roll with me on this, y'all. on the fact that your constituents have an expectation of us. And their expectation is that when we come inside this deliberate body, that we do right by them. If you have not read, this is also not popular with some Republicans. And I'm not even talking about in this room. I'm talking about outside these chambers. And it's reflected because 56 or 57% of the people of this state, they do not want any gerrymandered maps. So I'll close with this, because I'm hoping that I don't want to talk at you. I don't want to do any of that, but call us all in for the moment. And if anybody who said, I've read somebody on Twitter said that y'all need to go after Republicans, y'all need to make sure, listen, hear me what I'm telling you. And I don't care if you don't like me after I say it. This country and where we are right now, everybody has gone to their side of the wall, and nobody is talking to nobody. And if I can't tell you all anything else, and if you could hear me when I tell you, I don't have children yet. Many of you do. You have grandchildren, you have nieces, and you have nephews. There's going to come a time to where your children, your grandchildren, your nieces, and your nephews are going to ask you the question, what did you do in this moment? I can't tell y'all what to do here. I can't campaign for you when you go back home for you to say why you voted for this. You got to give the reason on why you voted for this. But what I hope you can do is answer your children, your grandchildren, your nieces, and your nephews. And I hope you can tell them that I did this because it was the right thing to do. I saw some of my colleagues yesterday take a page out of that book of a Profiles in Courage. I'm not going to call them out because they know who they are. When that board light up, I hope some of you other ones, that you take a page out of Profiles in Courage. Not because you're trying to follow what somebody is telling you to do, but you're doing it because it's the right thing to do. Thank you, Mr. President.
Additional debate. Seeing none, the Senator of the 1st District, President Gates, you are recognized to close on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. My colleagues are absolutely correct that there's more to do and more we should do than talking about this issue. A whole host of issues that really affect how the people of Florida live and how they work and how they care for their families and their businesses. But let's not kid ourselves. We will have spent 2 days on an issue of congressional redistricting, which some folks in this room have said is a seminal issue that our grandchildren will demand to know how we voted on. So it's pretty important. But remember that we'll be back here in a few days with Chair Hooper, and we will be discussing and working on and grinding through and solving, I hope, over $100 billion worth of issues that have to do with the kitchen table concerns of the people of Florida. So we're not discarding those issues. We're not dealing with those issues. We are. Believe me, Chair Hooper is going to lead us through a process where we'll have plenty of time to chew on every one of those things. And there will be great debate, and there will be great discussion, and I hope great decisions. And then this governor that some of us, some in this chamber, are so troubled by, is also calling us back into special session to deal with another kitchen table issue. And that's property taxes that affect people all over the state of Florida. Not an easy issue to solve. I haven't seen, I've seen some suggestions come from this body, actually some pretty good suggestions. But I've not seen a plan yet, but there will be, I suppose, I suspect, I hope, a plan that will come from the governor's office. And that will provide the basis for us to carry forward with a debate, a discussion on that. The point I want to make is, to those who may be listening, and to all of us who deal with these issues every day, Just because we're talking about redistricting of congressional districts for 2 days doesn't mean that we're not concerned about the other issues that we're dealing with, because we have been, and because we are, and because we will be. So be confident that you'll have plenty of opportunity to deal with all of that. Been a lot of things said today. You know, it really does call to mind the saying that everything has been said, but not by everybody. But I think everybody said it today. Everyone has had their opportunity. There's been good debate, been passionate debate, maybe even a little hyperbole here and there. It's not quite the end of the world. These are not the times where we have to make final choices about living and dying, I hope, in this issue. But the governor has a constitutional role and responsibility in congressional redistricting. He doesn't in redistricting of House and Senate seats in this chamber and across the hall. And so in answer to the question, well, why isn't the governor asking us to redraw lines for Senate and House districts? Why aren't we doing that? It's because the governor does not have a role in that, and so we can't criticize him for not raising that issue and saying, well, because of population shifts, shouldn't we be redrawing Senate districts and House districts? The fact is, that's not his prerogative. That's your prerogative. It is the governor's responsibility, and he has only a responsibility as to redistricting with respect to congressional districts. And so he's proposed a map. And some people don't like the map very much because it maybe bisects or trisects or slices or dices areas or communities that you think ought to be handled in a different way. And therefore, that always happens. I can tell you, I've lived through three redistricting. I can show you the wounds in my side. And I can tell you that in every one of those cases, anytime anybody starts drawing lines across the cities and counties of the state of Florida, you're going to bisect and trisect some people and some communities. It always happens. It's inevitable if you're going to have compact districts and if you're going to follow the law. So, the governor has a prerogative. He has followed that prerogative. He's proposed a map. The map meets the standards of compactness. We've had a good discussion about that, but we also have testimony that I've referred to before and have quoted, and that the as the compactness calculus is defined, we have about the same compactness calculus in the governor's proposed map as we do in the existing map that we have now. And then there are the questions about cutting cities and counties. You cut in cities and counties every time you do redistricting. It's inevitable. And in the current map, there are 50 counties that are kept whole. In other words, there are counties with only one district. In the governor's map, it's 48. So it's 2 more, but it's not the end of the world. And cities with only one district, well, there are 396 on the current map and 382 in the governor's map. Again, a little bit of difference, but not the end of the world. So let's not say here or say back home that counties and cities have been destroyed. The fact is, it's pretty close to, in terms of the numbers of cities and counties that are kept whole or sliced and diced, about the same as the current map. Why in the world is the governor doing this? He gave us 2 reasons. His reasons are, number one, that we have a disproportionate population influx in some parts of the state. And the governor's map drawers have used what they say are the only invalid numbers that they could, the 2020 census, and then the United States Census Bureau provides on a 3-year basis an analysis, because they look at population, about 3% of the population, of where their shifts might be. And the governor's used the EDR analysis and come back and said, well, here are the counties that have gotten bigger and the counties that haven't gotten as big. And there's been no criticism, no debate, no proof, no evidence offered on this floor in the Rules Committee that any of the EDR analysis is wrong. And so that's what we have. We have the evidence before us that there's population shifts. Some parts of our state, because of the significant growth we've had, 9% growth, 1.8 million people, that those people are somewhere. And because they are somewhere, the question then arises, is there equal representation? If there are more people in a congressional district on the north side of the railroad tracks and fewer people in the congressional district on the south side of the railroad tracks, the fact is there is not equal representation. There is not one person, one vote. And so the governor's proposal is to try to remedy that, and his maps are represented to remedy that. And as the map drawer explained, there are exactly the same number of individuals, citizens, in each one of the congressional districts that the governor's office has proposed. And we can't really deny that there are 1.8 million more people. We can't really deny that if more people move into a congressional district next door, that you have a diminishment of electoral power if you have more people in one district and fewer people in another. And that's what we have. So what do you do in a situation like that? Well, you can do mid-decade redistricting. It's been done before. It's been done as a result of court order. It's been done as a result of impetus from legislatures and from governors. And there are 7 states that have done it already. And 4 times we've done it in the state of Florida because we've been required to do so. And so therefore, mid-decade redistricting is not uncommon. It's not unprecedented. It can be done. And what would be a good reason to do it? A good reason to do it would be that we have an extraordinarily unique situation in Florida with this tremendous additional number of people who moved to our state and have been disproportionately placed in different parts of the state. That would be the reason to do it, to ensure that as soon as possible, and that's why the governor says do it now, as soon as possible, we can really get to closer to, as close as we possibly can, to one person, one vote. And the second reason he says is because he wants, he believes, and I think in this chamber there's been extraordinary support for that belief as it pertains to other public policies, that race ought not to be an issue that defines or divides us. And therefore he doesn't want lines that define or divide us on the basis of race. Not only does he not want it, he thinks it's unconstitutional, and he offers a legal theory. We talk about our oath, and I think it's good we talk about our oath. It's an oath to preserve and protect the Constitution of the state of Florida and of the United States of America. Well, the governor's legal theory is that the Constitution of the United States provides equal protection, and the Constitution of the state of Florida may not. Now, that'll be a case that will ripen and go to the courts, but that's his legal theory. So when you promise an oath, when you pledge an oath to the Constitution of our state and of the United States, and if there is a conflict, and sometimes there is a conflict between state law and federal law, and between state constitutions and federal constitutions, and the governor's legal theory is that there is, and that there ought not to be lines drawn on the basis of race, and that it is unconstitutional with respect to the United States Constitution. Well, what do you do when you have a conflict like that? Well, you could look to the courts to decide it. You can look to history to guide it. The last time I looked, Lee offered his sword to Grant at Appomattox, not the other way around. So the Supremacy Clause suggests that when there is a conflict between the federal Constitution and the state Constitution, the federal Constitution dominates. And that's the governor's legal theory. That is his theory of the case. And then, of course, we come to the case of Louisiana, which, interestingly enough, gets dropped in our lap today. And you can look at that, you can look at that case and you can read it. I truly believe that Senator Pizzo would be ready today. My guess is that he's read the whole doggone thing, and he'd be ready to go toe-to-toe with any one of us on that issue. But I will say this, no matter how you read it, you know that that Supreme Court opinion that dropped today does not make it easier to draw lines based on racial preference. It makes it harder. It raises the standard. It says that the only time you can do it is when you have an egregious practice that has to be remedied by changing the lines. And in the state of Florida, there is no evidence that's been presented in the Rules Committee or presented on this floor, evidence, not even an argument, that suggests there is that kind of egregious discrimination that requires us to draw lines on the basis of race. So, you know, there are members here today who've said, well, we need to decide what's right and wrong. And this comes down to, you know, the oath that you took and the beliefs that you have. And I become persuaded even more so, being back in this chamber in the last 2 years, that we need to do less and less in dividing our state and dividing each other and dividing issues on the basis of race, and we need to do more and more to make sure that race is not a dividing issue. And we've made all sorts of choices in this chamber in the last 2 years to do that. And now the governor has asked us, he's told us, and that in his judgment, in his legal opinion, that the United States Constitution requires us to not draw lines on the basis of race. And there are many things about the governor's proposal that I have tried as carefully as I can to explain are the governor's proposal. They're not Don Gates' proposal. They're the governor's proposal. But I will tell you this, I agree with the governor that we should not be drawing lines on the basis of race. I agree with the governor about that. I think it's the strongest part of his argument. Now, the governor's legal team and I disagree about this. And of course, I'm not a lawyer, and they're probably going to make all kinds of cases and all kinds of arguments about why I'm wrong. But I believe that the rest of the Fair Districts Amendment could and should and ought to stand. I don't think we should do gerrymandering on the basis of political partisanship. And I don't think this map, I think there's no evidence that's been presented on this floor that this map does that. There's argument, there's contention, there's opinion, but no evidence. I believe that we should be required to follow all of the other demands of the Fair Districts Amendment. If it turns out that defining and writing and drawing lines on the basis of race is wrong and is unconstitutional on the basis of the federal Constitution, I still believe everything else in the Fair Districts Amendment ought to stand and should stand and does stand. And as one senator, I will do everything I can to keep all of those provisions in law, whether or not my own party agrees with me. So, what are we left with? Well, some members in this body say that we're being dictated to. I don't know all of you as well as I'd like, but I know all of you to some extent. I don't know any of you who like to be dictated to. You're a pretty independent group of cusses. I don't think that you do very well being told. And I will tell you this, I've not been dictated to. Nobody from the White House told me that I ought to stand up here today and make the arguments that I'm making, and that I ought to place my name on this bill. Nobody in the governor's office asked me to. The governor didn't call me. He didn't say, hey, Don, you know, I need you to do this for me, buddy. He didn't do that. Instead, I have a responsibility like each one of you do. Each one of you have responsibilities in your committees. Many of you are committee chairs or vice chairs. And if it falls to you because of an issue that is within the jurisdiction of your committee, to present legislation on behalf of the governor or on behalf of the Senate itself. I mean, you'll make that choice. I did too. I was asked if I would present this bill that the governor transmitted to us, and I said I would. I said I would because I think it's my responsibility to make sure that when the governor of the state of Florida, whether I like him or not, whether he's my party or not, when he asks us within his authority and jurisdiction to take up a general bill, I think it's the least we can do to take it up thoughtfully and respectfully and debate it carefully and thoroughly, and then vote our conscience and vote as we will. And that's what we've done. So I want to compliment my fellow senators. I know that, maybe the rhetoric has gotten a little away with some of us, but by the same token, I thank you for your thoughtful and considered debate. I thank you for taking the governor's proposal seriously. Some of you very, very seriously enough to think it's close to, the end of the world. And others of you to take it seriously because you believe, as I do, that drawing lines on the basis of race is wrong and unconstitutional. But whatever you believe, it's not the governor's bill anymore. Now it's our bill. Now it comes to this floor and to the floor of the House. The House has already acted. And so we have the House bill before us. And we have the final decision. We have the final vote. And so this is not the governor's decision. It sure is not the president's decision. It's not any political party's decision. Nobody told me to do this. Nobody told you how to vote. But it is your decision. And this is why it's such an honor to be a Florida senator. Because at the end of the day, nobody will tell you what to do on this vote. At the end of the day, you will decide what's logical, what's rational, what's thoughtful, what will work, and what is moral and right. And you'll vote your conscience. And that's what I ask you to do. Thank you, Mr. President.
Secretary, I will unlock the board, and senators proceed to vote. Have all senators voted? Lock the board, record the vote.
21 yeas, 17 nays, Mr. President.
So the bill passes. Before I recognize the Rules Chair for a motion, are there any announcements? Rules Chair Pasadoma, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate adjourn sine die.
Without objection, show the motion adopted. The Senate is now adjourned. Sine die.